Everything changed when the status scouter came out, a new item that lets everyone see an adventurer's exact strength. And just like that, A-rank parties all over the place started kicking out anyone with low stats, leading to this masked guy laughing in a girl's face, telling Villain she should be happy because she's officially exiled. Villain completely loses it, crying her eyes out and begging them not to leave her behind like this. But as Eizen Tesler watches the whole mess happen, he's got his own ideas about how things should go. So he looks at the guy and asks if he's really kicking her out, because if that's the case, then he decides he'll be the one to take her in, since he knows a person's worth isn't just about some numbers. And he's set on a new goal, to gather up all the so-called weakest people and show the world who's really on top. Later on, the scene moves over to the city of Daytona, specifically inside a building where Eizen is sitting in an interview room at the Regal Guild, only to get told straight up that he's not hired. Eizen looks completely stunned by the news and asks why they won't hire him, but he tries to sell himself, explaining that as a graduate from the Guild Master Academy, he's 100% sure he'd be a great staff member. The guy across the desk just gives him a fake smile and says that things don't work like that anymore. So Eizen doubles down, telling the guy that an adventurer's worth is about way more than just their stats. And he suggests that the guild could actually beat the competition if they changed how they judge people. But the interviewer just cuts him off, stating that the current system is what everyone else is doing, and he has zero interest in going against the trend. The guy tells Eizen straight up to just give up on working there, leaving Eizen with no choice but to agree. Looking down at his application, there's a massive X drawn over it, a total rejection, which leads Eizen back out to the first floor hall of the Regal Guild, where he lets out a tired sigh and counts it up, realizing that's 10 different places that have turned him down now. Adventuring is known for being a pretty dangerous life, mostly just hunting monsters, but it's become a massive trend since anyone can get rich and famous if they're strong enough. The guilds are there to help out by handing out jobs and sharing info, and new guilds are opening up all over the city, constantly fighting to recruit anyone they can get. Each guild master is supposed to protect their own and follow their own style, making that job the ultimate goal for every kid out there, including Eizen. With the whole industry booming, every guild is desperate for more staff to help out. Yet Eizen knows the economy isn't the reason he's getting rejected, and he thinks it's total garbage. It's crazy to him that these places think stats are the only thing that defines an adventurer, mostly because they're too stuck in their ways to even think about changing their beliefs. Going back about a year, the Merchant Guild brought out this brand new tool. They called it the Status Scouter, and it was made to put a real number on a person's power. Everyone started using it because the numbers seemed spot on, but it was rough for people like Villain, since it became the only way anyone would judge how strong you were. The world used to be about what you could actually do, but it shifted into this new system where the only thing that matters to people is your score. Although Eizen isn't buying into any of that because he's got his own proof to rely on. A girl looks at him totally confused, telling him that kind of thing doesn't even exist, but it's been like this for Eizen since he was a kid, seeing things nobody else could. And by the time he started at the academy to become a guild master, he knew he was different. Over time, Eizen learned how to control his eyes, switching his special sight on and off whenever he needed to, and eventually, he started to understand exactly what all those weird letters and numbers actually meant. Back at the academy, a teacher is losing it, shouting about how someone's grades are way too low to ever become a guild master. But he doesn't stop there, telling the kid to just give up while the poor guy stammers out an apology and tries to pick up his papers. The student is clearly hit hard by the insults, standing there with tears in his eyes, which catches Eizen's attention. The kid looks over at him, and Eizen decides he's seen enough of this bullying. Eizen speaks up, telling the professor that the student actually has a real gift for bringing people together. And then he doubles down, arguing that being a successful guild master takes way more than just getting good grades on paper. The teacher is fuming now, yelling Eizen's full name and asking if he's really going to disrespect him with more lies. So he hits Eizen with a final warning, reminding him that his entire future at the academy depends on the grades he gives out. The student gives Eizen a sad smile, thanking him for the help but saying it's okay and that the teacher is actually right, which leaves Eizen completely shocked as the kid says he's just going to give up on his dreams and take over his family business instead. He walks away into the light, telling Eizen to work hard for both of them since he's the only one left with a chance, and Eizen just stands there, staring ahead with a look of pure focus as he realizes he has to prove himself in a world that only cares about numbers. The scene shifts to someone shouting for Villain, using that dead last nickname to get her attention while a group of high-level adventurers struts into the room, with their leader yelling out that he's got some amazing news for everyone. It turns out the guy with the crazy grin is Salvio, the big-shot leader of an A-rank party called the Silver Wolves, and Villain just stands there looking confused, trying to figure out what kind of good news he could possibly have for her. She's clearly nervous, asking her leader what's actually happening as he stands there looking way too proud of himself. Salvio finally drops the bomb, announcing that the Silver Wolves have officially been promoted to an S-rank party. Villain looks totally hyped, asking if the news is actually for real, while Salvio just laughs and confirms it like it's the best thing ever. She starts tearing up with joy, thinking about how they're finally becoming an S-rank party after all this time, and Salvio's face suddenly changes, getting this sharp, scary look as he tells her there's a catch to the deal. Eizen is watching from the sidelines. He can tell something is wrong and just waits to see what happens next. Salvio explains that to get even better results as an S-rank group, they need members with way higher abilities, meaning they have to clear some space in the roster, which is why he's making a big move right now. He drops the bomb that he already turned in her withdrawal form to the guild, leaving Villain standing there completely shook. The guy keeps going, telling her straight to her face that she's officially an outcast and doesn't belong with them anymore. Villain can barely get her words out, asking why this is happening when she's always worked her heart out for the team. Salvio just looks her in the eye and yells that it's because her stats are total trash, and that's all that matters to him. Eizen watches from the shadows. He's seen this exact same thing happen way too many times before. It turns out that the status scouter didn't just make people obsessed with stats, it actually started a massive trend called the banishment boom, a phase where strength was turned into simple numbers, leading high-rank parties to start kicking out any members they didn't want anymore. Salvio laughs in Villain's face, telling her she should be happy to be part of such a big movement. Another teammate joins in, saying good riddance because a weak swordsman who's only good for hitting traps is just a waste of space. Villain stands there as her eyes fill with tears. She can't even find the words to respond as she suddenly grabs onto Salvio and begs him not to leave her behind like this. Salvio loses his cool and shoves her off, yelling at her to shut up and stay away from him since she's just a permanent loser. Villain ends up collapsed on the ground, covered in dirt and just crying her eyes out. Eizen watches the whole thing go down and thinks, to be blunt, this entire banishment trend is just complete bullshit. The logic is pretty simple. People think adventurers with high stats are the only ones who are strong and can get results. But while that might be true on paper, nobody actually realizes that there's a lot more value to a person than just their numbers. Eizen looks on as the scene gets worse, ready to prove his point with a specific example. His eye starts to glow as he focuses his vision on the girl on the ground. Salvio just keeps standing over Villain while she's collapsed and crying, showing no mercy at all. Suddenly, a strange light starts coming off Villain. Eizen sees something nobody else can. He calls out his appraisal eye, using his power to see what's really going on beneath the surface. He's looking for something specific like a hidden skill or a secret talent that the scouters missed, and it turns out his eyes can see the unique traits of other people, specifically the hidden skills they don't even know they have. Eizen looks on with his glowing eye, telling himself he's not changing his mind because he can finally see the truth. He looks at Salvio and sees a hidden skill called Robust Body that boosts his stats by 40%. Which explains why the guy is so strong, since most top-tier adventurers have hidden powers like that. But there's a catch. When Eizen shifts his focus to Villain, a massive amount of hidden energy starts pouring out of her body. Eizen just stands there completely shocked by the level of power he's seeing from the girl on the ground. He can't believe the skill she's hiding, while Villain just sits there shaking and barely able to speak. She looks up at Salvio and begs him for just one more chance to prove she belongs in the party. Salvio lets out a creepy, sharp-toothed grin and tells her that maybe they can work something out. He says if she shows him her stats and they look good enough, he might actually reconsider kicking her out. So he starts tapping on the scouter to pull up her interface and see what her numbers really look like. Salvio pulls up Villain's status screen and yells for her to look at it, showing everyone her low stats. He mocks her by saying all her numbers are only 3 digits while the rest of the party has thousands, calling her dead last Villain. He points out that her attack, defense, and stamina are officially the lowest in the entire group. Salvio keeps going, calling her a coward who's useless in a fight and saying she's only good for dodging traps, but then he tells her he doesn't even need her for that anymore, leaving Villain crying and unable to say anything. While she breaks down and starts wailing, Eizen watches and thinks they're too obsessed with numbers to see her real value, wondering if this is what an S-rank party is really like. Eizen looks at their smug expressions and asks himself if this is how the guild and adventurers should actually be. The whole situation feels wrong to him, and he keeps questioning if this behavior is really okay. Moving on, the professor smiles while telling Eizen to make sure his share is handled too. So Eizen clenches his fist and tells himself there's absolutely no way he can just let this happen. Eizen takes a firm step forward, remembering how becoming a guild master was always his main goal, and failing his 10th interview was actually the final push he needed to move on. He knows that a person's worth isn't just about their numbers, and he wants to show everyone that, the people who get kicked out aren't actually useless, especially as he looks at Villain crying. So he turns to Salvio and asks if he's really just going to banish the kid like that, and Eizen declares he's building a guild with his own hands and tells Salvio he's taking her with him. Salvio looks completely stunned by the guy's guts, while Eizen just stares him down, leaving Villain staring up at him with tears in her eyes, totally confused by what's happening. Salvio loses his mind and screams at him, asking who the hell he thinks he even is, but Eizen just casually mentions he started a guild, and he's currently scouting for new members. Eizen explains he heard a top-tier adventurer was free, so he decided to step in, but Salvio just laughs in his face, telling them both to back off while he's still being nice, noting that her stats were the only good thing about her old party anyway. Salvio yells at them for ignoring him, but Eizen just ignores the guy and tells Villain to give him her hand, and he starts unclicking the scouter device strapped to her wrist. With one quick move, Eizen rips the thing off and tosses it away, leaving Salvio completely speechless. As Eizen tells Villain she doesn't have to care about those numbers anymore, and he's going to show her what she's really worth. He asks her to come with him, and through her tears, Villain finally looks up and says okay, standing there with him in the light like they're finally starting something real. Salvio just gives a creepy little laugh and says good for you with the most annoyed look on his face. Villain stands there completely stunned, thinking about how she just got recruited by some crazy guild that doesn't care about scouters at all. Salvio just smirks at their backs, telling them to have fun playing pretend with their new friends while they try to catch up to his rank, but Eizen stops, turning back to call him out for using Villain as nothing more than a decoy to set off traps. He tells Salvio he better start watching his own step from now on, wearing a sharp smirk, as he wonders out loud if a guy like Salvio is even capable of doing that. The comment hits Salvio hard, leaving him standing there in total shock and mounting anger. Eizen doesn't wait for a reply, he just turns around and starts walking away with Villain, leaving the A-rank leader behind. Salvio starts shaking, physically losing it because he's so pissed off he can't even finish a sentence. He finally snaps and screams at the top of his lungs, demanding to know who that guy thinks he is while his own team tries to get him to calm down. As they get some distance, Villain looks up at the sky and asks Eizen about these hidden skills he mentioned, and Eizen just nods, telling her that everyone has parts of them that numbers and scouters will never be able to measure. Eizen looks her straight in the eye and explains that his eyes can actually see those hidden skills, including hers, making Villain look completely lost, asking if she really has a power like that since she thought she was just walking in front. So Eizen explains that most people use these skills without even knowing it, or they just never end up using them at all, and he bets that when she was moving through the dungeon, she was unconsciously avoiding any path that gave her a bad vibe. The real reason Villain survived being used as a meat shield by her old party wasn't just luck. It happened because she was using a skill called Hyper Sixth Sense to keep them away from danger. He lists off other examples like seeing a monster's weak spot, which leaves Villain standing there in total shock, as he confirms that what she has is the Super Sixth Sense, a power that makes her able to predict exactly where traps are hidden and where monsters are going to spawn. Eizen realizes she might have known about it all along, so he asks her why she'd ever hide an incredible power like that. Villain looks down and mentions how her old leader always told her she didn't have any say in matters, but Eizen looks her in the eyes and tells her she doesn't have to hold back anymore, encouraging her to finally use her special talents however she wants. With a kind smile, he formally introduces himself as Eizen Tesler and lets her know he'll be her new employer from now on, adding that it's a real pleasure to have her on the team. Villain is totally on board and promises to follow Lord Eizen anywhere he goes, even mentioning how much she's looking forward to working together. Eizen welcomes her officially, calling her Virin-chan, which sends her into a bit of a panic. She starts blushing like crazy and begs him to drop the formal titles, saying being called something that nice is just way too much for her. He just winks and says he gets it, welcoming her again as just Virin, so she lights up with a massive smile and tells him she's ready for whatever orders he has. Villain looks up at Eizen and asks him what kind of guild he actually runs, and he starts explaining his plan to bring together people who got kicked out of other parties. He wants to build a place for them because even if their stats look low, they still have skills that matter, skills that deserve a fair shot. He tells her he's willing to bet his life on making a world where people are judged fairly, and just like that, they take the first step together for this new, nameless guild. It's the start of their search for more teammates, but mostly, Eizen is determined to finally put an end to this whole trend of people getting banished for no reason. The mood shifts instantly when Villain lets out a confused yell, so Eizen stops and realizes he needs to be honest about the situation. He tells her he has to come clean, and mentions that he hasn't actually set up the guild, yet turns out Villain is literally the very first person he's recruited. Villain completely loses it, grabbing her face and asking if this is just some new way to scam her, but he's quick to tell her that isn't the case at all. He tries to calm her down, promising he's going to build everything from the ground up and that she can trust him. Eizen admits there's a bit of a catch to his big plan. To actually make the guild official, he has to submit an application at the Guild Federation headquarters over in the next town of Biam. He realizes they're broke and will run out of food money by tomorrow if they don't move fast. And he really feels like he needs to help Villain find her confidence again after the way she was treated by her old party. She's looking pretty rough from her travels, so before they head out, he decides they need to take care of the most obvious problem first. Villain looks a bit confused until Eizen tells her they definitely need to go get some better gear before doing anything else. A whole list of options pops up, ranging from basic leather armor to some pretty crazy outfits like a bunny suit or a kimono. They head over to a place called Lagodio Trading Co. to see what they can find, and shortly after, Villain steps out in her new gear, blushing as she asks Eizen how she looks. Eizen takes one look at Villain in her new gear and completely loses his cool, letting out a surprised shout before telling her she looks beautiful and the outfit really suits her. Villain is totally flustered and can barely get a word out, while Eizen just stands there with a big smile. The young shopkeeper jumps in to ask what Eizen thinks of the selection, and then he starts hyping up the dress, explaining it's a new arrival that mixes soft cotton with really sturdy materials. He promises it's lighter and way more durable than basic leather gear, and he even shows off a top-tier rapier that's sharp enough to pierce right through chainmail. Eizen checks out the equipment and has to admit the quality is definitely as good as it looks. Villain is still a bit unsure though, asking if the whole look might be a little too cute for a serious adventurer. But the kid tells her that nowadays, everyone cares about style just as much as how the gear actually works. Eizen thinks it over and says that since adventurers put their lives on the line, looking good while doing it isn't a problem, which gets the young shopkeeper hyped up, as he yells out that Eizen is 100% right. Villain stands there in the new gear, showing off the clean white fabric and the huge flower bow decorating her waist. Eizen asks if she actually likes the look, but Villain starts panicking, saying she can't afford brand new gear like this. Eizen just shrugs it off and says he'll pay for the whole thing, making Villain lose it while the shopkeeper happily takes the sale. Villain is shaking from the shock, asking if he's really sure about this since he's being way too nice to her. Eizen tells her not to worry about it because he's got enough cash on him to cover it, even though he's secretly thinking to himself that some cash is literally every cent he owns. He figures that getting her some real equipment is the best way to help Villain change her mindset, and thinks it's a solid investment to make sure she can actually handle herself during their missions from now on. Eizen gives her a warm smile and says that besides the stats, seeing her look so cute is a total treat for him. Making Villain turn bright red, she's practically steaming as she stammers out a thank you. Eizen tells her it's time to move out and asks where she thinks they should head next, so they make their way to the Adventurers Guild known as Avalon, where Eizen plans to pick up their very first job together. Villain is completely floored by the size of the place, standing there with her mouth wide open, while Eizen just watches her reaction. The courtyard is packed with all kinds of adventurers hanging around and prepping for their own missions, and Eizen mentions he actually knows someone who works here before reaching out to open the main doors. They step into the massive, sunlit hall of the guild, but just as they're getting their bearings, someone nearby lets out a startled yell when something suddenly zips through the air, as a huge bird comes diving down from the rafters, screeching right at them. The massive bird lets out a loud screech as it dives through the air. Villain freezes up in shock, trying to figure out what kind of creature it is, while someone yells out to the bird. A girl calls out from the side, apologizing for the scare and pointing them toward the reception, but she stops short when she thinks the guy isn't actually Eizen. But then her face lights up with a huge grin and she tells him it's been way too long. Eizen gives a relaxed smile greeting Kagari and her bird companion Naharia, who chirps happily at his arrival. Eizen mentions that her new uniform is a pretty bold choice, but she just brushes it off, saying it's the style now and asking if it looks good. So Eizen tells her it actually suits her perfectly, and then he remembers how the red of her old school uniform used to stand out too. Kagari turns bright red and starts yelling, telling him that getting a compliment from a guy like him doesn't make her happy at all. Even as Naharia chirps in like it's laughing at her, she just keeps insisting she isn't happy about it, and she finally snaps at the bird, telling it that a bird of prey shouldn't be making fun of people like that. Eizen watches the two of them interact and laughs, mentioning that Kagari and her bird still get along just like they used to, while he suggests they should probably do a proper introduction to clear the air. Kagari officially introduces herself as Kagarina Kagura, along with her partner Bird Harrier, and she adds that she's also the only daughter of the guild master for Avalon. She stands there looking pretty confident in her uniform, with the bird perched on her arm. Villain immediately panics and bows as low as she can, shouting out that it's nice to meet her, and that her name is Virine Abrilia. Kagari just winks and tells her to drop the formal act because she wants to be on good terms with the adventurers, which makes her turn back to Eizen with a bit of an attitude, asking if he's finally there to report that he got a job and a cute girlfriend, but Eizen just keeps it cool and tells her the truth. He explains that he actually gave up on trying to get hired at any of the old guilds and decided to just start his own from scratch. Kagari completely loses it, screaming at the top of her lungs because she can't believe what she's hearing, and even though she admits she knew he'd try something like this one day, she's still totally floored that he's doing it this soon. Kagarina looks down and sighs, agreeing that Eizen hasn't changed a bit since their academy days. He's always been completely focused. She explains her unique gift, telling them she can actually talk to pretty much any animal, not just hawks. Eizen jumps in to clarify, telling Villain that animal talk is Kagarina's secret skill. He adds that she's been using those beast tamer abilities to help keep the guild running smoothly. Eizen looks back on the past, mentioning they were classmates and that she was the very first person to believe in his appraisal powers and hidden skills. They go back a long way, standing together as students during their time at the training academy. Villain looks a little stunned, repeating the part about them being together at school. Eizen notices her acting strange and calls her name, but Villain starts waving her hands around and blushing, yelling that it's not what he thinks. She shouts at the top of her lungs that she isn't jealous or anything like that. Eizen watches her freak out and realizes Villain is a girl after all, figuring she's just embarrassed because she probably wanted to talk to animals too. Kagarina puts the pieces together and asks if Virin is the one he's talking about. Eizen confirms it, calling her the glorious first member of the guild. Naharia the hawk suddenly chimes in, warning Virin to speak up right away if Eizen tries anything weird. Kagarina doubles down, threatening to report him to the Federation and throw him in jail, while Eizen tells her to stop making him look bad. Virin just laughs it off and says she's fine even though they just met. She's already starting to trust him. She explains that seeing how Kagarina and the others act around him proved he's a good guy, which catches the group off guard. Kagarina gets all flustered and blushes, admitting that Eizen is decent. Even if she won't give him too much credit, Naharia lets out a loud squawk, making Kagarina snap at the bird to shut up. Eizen gets back to business, mentioning they need to scrape together enough cash for the guild application and all their startup costs. He admits he had to swallow his pride just to come here and ask for a job. Kagarina immediately crosses her arms in a big X and tells him they don't have any work for him. Kagarina shuts him down pretty quick, saying there aren't any regular jobs for a weird team-up like an adventurer and a school grad, but Eizen just looks her right in the eye and asks what they have in the way of unusual requests. That catches Kagarina off guard for a second, as she realizes he knows exactly where she's hiding the work. She sighs, admitting she can't really keep secrets from someone who graduated the academy like him. She mentions they actually do have some things called internal handling requests, though she seems pretty hesitant about it. Virin asks what that even means, so Eizen explains these are the unpopular jobs that basically nobody is willing to touch. Kagarina goes on to explain that the guild is supposed to handle all the requests and help people out, except the reality is that every adventurer is just looking to make the most money possible. Because of that, no one wants to take the jobs that are too dangerous or just a huge pain, which ends up leaving the clients in a bad spot. Virin agrees that sounds like a serious issue, and Kagarina tells her she's exactly right. Kagarina keeps explaining the situation, saying that even if a job is something no one wants to do, the guild can't just back out once they've accepted it, because it makes them look bad to their clients. Eizen listens and then asks what they usually do about those jobs here at Avalon. She says they usually just bump up the reward money and beg their exclusive or high-ranking parties to take the hit. Villain finally gets why they call these things internally handled requests, but Kagarina points out that they can't pull that trick for every single job, so a lot of people still end up getting turned away. Eizen hears that and just looks at her, calling her out on the fact that she clearly wants to get all those leftover jobs off her desk. He asks to see what's actually left, telling her their goals are basically the same right now, and he even jokes that the bird Harrier agrees with him. Kagarina isn't buying it though, asking how he could possibly know what the bird is saying when he doesn't speak its language. The bird squawks and Villain tries to keep things moving as Kagarina starts to get visibly worked up. Kagarina finally snaps and yells in frustration, slamming a whole stack of quest papers down on the counter for them to see. Eizen reaches out and grabs the stack of papers Kagarina threw down, thanking her for the help, but she leans way over the counter and screams at him to not overdo it, reminding him that he could actually die. She looks at him with genuine worry in her eyes, clearly stressed out about his safety, so Eizen just gives her a warm smile and thanks her for always looking out for him like that. He promises to be extra careful, which makes Kagarina blush and look away while she grumbles about his attitude, but she eventually gives in. Eizen starts flipping through the pile, counting up to 18 different jobs before he stops on one specific paper and lets her know that he's decided on this one. He puts the paper down and tells Kagarina to get the official paperwork started so they can get going. Kagarina and Villain both lean in to see what he picked, and they both look completely shocked by his choice, leading to a dark, creepy stone entrance covered in thick, nasty roots that looks like a total nightmare. Eizen stands in front of the dungeon entrance. It's a dark stone doorway completely overgrown with thick roots and vines. Beside him, Viren is absolutely losing her mind. She's shaking like a leaf and making these weird, panicked noises. Eizen tells her to just breathe and that things will be fine, but she grabs her head and screams that she can't do it because today is definitely the day she's gonna die. They're standing at the foot of a massive, headless stone statue wrapped in vines. The place is known as the highest difficulty labyrinth in existence, and looking at the scale of the ruins makes Viren shout at the top of her lungs that there's no way they can actually clear this. The quest paper in Eizen's hand shows a difficulty level with a crazy amount of stars, proving just how dangerous this job really is. The goal is to get all the way to the bottom of this underground nightmare to find a single pendant. The paperwork shows a sketch of the necklace that was dropped deep inside, and it turns out the client is some famous old adventurer who had to retire because he got messed up pretty bad during a run. Ever since that day, the old guy hasn't been able to stop thinking about the pendant he left behind in the dark. The old adventurer really wants that pendant back, so he actually paid Avalon a ton of money to take the job. Kagarina is completely losing it, yelling that this mission is basically a suicide mission. She asks Eizen if he's an idiot or if he's just looking for a way to get killed, but even though she fought him on it until the very end, Eizen stayed convinced that this was their best shot at succeeding. He turns to Villain and tells her this is the perfect request for her. It's the best way for her to actually use that super sixth sense of hers. Eizen says all she has to do is start believing in her own individuality, and Villain just stands there looking overwhelmed, trying to get a word out while Eizen keeps talking, mentioning that since it's an internal guild request, they don't have to stress. He tells her no one will even be mad if they can't finish it, so there's really no reason for them to push themselves too hard today. He gives her a little wink and tells her if things start looking bad, they can always just turn around and run away. That seems to do the trick, because Villain finally finds her voice and shouts that she's going to give it her best shot. Villain takes a deep breath and readies herself to lead the way into the dark, looking a little nervous but mostly just focused. She makes a quiet sound, concentrating hard on her surroundings until she points toward one of the dark archways, telling Eizen that the right path is probably the way to go. Eizen just stares at her, totally blown away by her confidence, and tells her she's amazing. Meanwhile, the two of them keep moving deeper into the maze. They've been exploring this place for hours now, but the weirdest thing is that they haven't run into any monsters or tripped a single trap. It doesn't really make sense, because the harder the dungeon is supposed to be, the more deadly traps and monster fights you're usually going to find lurking around every corner. Even so, Villain has managed to guide them through perfectly without any trouble, but then she suddenly stops and calls out to Eizen. She looks back at him with a pretty worried expression, saying she's got a really bad feeling about this. A massive stone golem stomps through the dungeon, its heavy rock body shaking the entire hallway as it passes right by the corner where Eizen and Villain are holding their breath, hidden just out of sight. Eizen can't believe what he's seeing even though his appraisal eye told him she was special. Witnessing it in person is something else entirely. He realizes her hidden skill is actually insane, wondering if this is Villain's true power that the scouters just couldn't measure. He looks over at her, totally impressed, while the golem's silhouette disappears through an archway, its heavy footsteps finally getting quieter. Eizen suggests they take a little break, telling Villain she must be exhausted from staying so sharp and on edge this whole time. She tries to say she's still fine to keep going, but Eizen just shushes her and tells her to get some rest because it's an official order from her guild master. She quietly agrees and slumps down against the brick wall, finally letting herself relax after the close call. Viren finally lets out a long breath as the adrenaline wears off, looking totally wiped out, while Eizen just smiles and hands her a small cup of water. She takes it with shaky hands and tells him he's being way too kind to her. She stares down at the drink, thinking back to how Salvio and the rest of the Silver Wolves treated her like trash. She realizes that nobody in her old group ever did anything like this for her. Eizen watches her for a second before asking why she was so hung up on staying with those guys. He points out that there are plenty of other parties around, and tells her straight up that her stats aren't even low for an A-rank adventurer. He goes on to say she didn't need to put up with teammates who just bullied her and called her names all day. Viren stays quiet, looking down at the cup in her lap with a look that says it's complicated, and staring at her own reflection in the water. She finally admits she stayed because she really wanted to change herself. Viren admits that she's always been a timid and cowardly person, and she spent a lot of time crying in her room just wondering why she was like that, as a memory of her younger self shows her sobbing and hugging a stuffed bunny because she hated how she always made mistakes. She explains that she really wanted to change that part of herself, and thought if she could just become a famous S-rank adventurer that everyone looked up to, then she'd finally be able to like herself. She sat there believing that for the longest time, but now she just looks defeated. Eizen finally gets why a timid girl like her would keep pushing herself to be an adventurer. He leans back against the wall, realizing that as the rank gets higher, the pressure just gets worse. Viren looks away from him, feeling the weight of it all, and she tells him that she just ended up holding him back during the fight. She looks totally crushed by the guilt, and she apologizes for being his very first party member. She forces a shaky, blushing smile while looking him in the eye and asks if she disappointed him. She looks like she's about to lose it, and eventually she just curls up into a ball and hides her face in her knees, completely overwhelmed by everything. Eizen watches her closely, thinking to himself that Villain is probably stuck in her own head, thinking that she hates herself for even saying those kinds of things out loud. But he knows that anxiety just creates more tension, and that kind of stress always leads to making more mistakes, creating this cycle of fear that's been haunting her for a long time. He finally gets why she has zero self-confidence, realizing it's actually the opposite of what she thinks. The real problem was the toxic environment she was in. Villain just looks up at him totally confused, not really getting where he's going with this. Eizen explains that even the best adventurers would be useless if they never got a chance to practice or never got any credit. And he tells her that her old party is the perfect example of people who do that. He looks pretty annoyed, realizing that what her former teammates did to her was way worse than he first thought. He points out that even if someone doesn't have high stats, being an adventurer isn't just about how well you can fight. Eizen reaches out his hand, thinking about how everyone just wants to be noticed and prove the people who doubted them wrong, basically telling Villain that wanting that kind of respect is something every single person feels deep down. He looks away for a second, admitting that he actually feels the exact same way as she does. Eizen asks her if she's disappointed to hear that, but Villain is just standing there totally caught off guard by what he's saying, so she quickly tells him that she feels the same and she isn't disappointed in him at all. They sit back down on the stone ledge together, and Eizen thanks her for being honest and opening up to him. Then he says he's actually happy he got the chance to learn more about such an important member of the guild. He looks her in the eye and tells her she doesn't need to force herself to act confident right now, promising her that he's going to build a place where she can finally show what she's really capable of, and he wants to make sure that one day she'll finally be able to actually believe in herself. Eizen keeps going, telling Villain he wants to build a place where she can finally feel proud of herself, and he promises her that everything is going to be okay. Villain just stares at him, her eyes wide as she tries to process how much he believes in her. He gives her a small smile, saying he knows she can do it, and this is his absolute goal. He points out that she's never going to see good results if she stays this gloomy and down on herself. So he explains that making an environment where she can be herself and succeed is exactly what his job is as a guild master. Villain looks at him with total respect, quietly whispering his name like she can't believe he'd do all this for her. But then a massive crashing sound suddenly echoes through the area. Both of them jump and look up at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Eizen looks confused, but Villain points toward the center of the room and tells him to look, where a giant golem made of stone has appeared. Right in front of the monster, Salvio is running for his life across the floor, panting and gasping for air. He looks completely trashed and barely able to keep moving as he tries to escape the beast. Salvio is absolutely losing it, screaming for anyone to help him while a massive stone golem stays right on his tail. He's crying and yelling in total fear as the monster closes the gap, and watching from the side, Villain can't believe her eyes. She asks what her old leader is even doing there and wonders if his party was exploring the same floor, but then she notices something even worse. She points out that the rest of his team is missing and starts to get a really bad feeling about whatever happened to them. Eizen doesn't hesitate though, telling Villain that they're going to save the guy. She just stands there completely frozen, so Eizen keeps talking, saying he knows she probably hates the dude after everything, but they can't just stand by and let him die. He tells her to just trust him on this one, but Villain looks down and tries to tell him that he's getting it all wrong. She says that her grudge isn't the reason she's hesitating at all, leading into her shaking and looking down at her own hands in total shock. She asks if he really expects her to take that thing on all by herself, and Eizen just looks at her, knowing that since he's a guild master and not a real adventurer, she's the only one there who can actually fight. Eizen looks at Viren and tells her he gets how scary it is to face a huge monster all by yourself. He admits he can't even imagine the kind of fear she's feeling, while Viren just stands there looking down, completely frozen and shadowed by the pressure. Aizen calls out her name to snap her out of it, asking if she can hear him and telling her to just take a deep breath. She looks up, still a bit shaky, but then Aizen points toward the monster and asks if she can spot the rock golem's weak point. Virine narrows her eyes and focuses on the massive creature for a second before saying she sees it, identifying a tiny opening right at the back of its neck. Aizen tells her she did a great job spotting it, but mentions that the problem is they can't actually hit a spot like that from the front. He starts thinking about how this golem already wrecked Salvio, and that guy has way better stats than Virine does. He realizes he has to be the one to step up and create an opening, so he tells Virine to get ready because he's going to make that thing turn its back to her right now. Aizen looks at Virine and tells her that once he gets the monster to move, she has to hit its weak point in one shot. She tries to argue because she's terrified, but she points out that the thing isn't showing any openings at all. Aizen doesn't even hesitate, just telling her no, while he grabs a rock and looks dead serious, saying he's going to be the one to force it to show its weak spot. He chucks the stone right at the golem's head. It just bounces off with a loud click, and then Aizen starts running like crazy, yelling at the golem to come and get him. Virine can't believe what she's seeing and screams his name as he puts himself right in the line of fire. The golem falls for the bait and winds up a massive, glowing punch that looks like it could level a building. It slams its fist down, causing a huge explosion of stone and dirt that sends Aizen flying back through the air. Aizen pulls himself together, letting out a nervous laugh while taunting the monster, telling it that it missed and he's still right over here. Virine just stands there on the sidelines, looking totally stressed out as she watches him risk his life. Villain watches him and realizes he's acting as a decoy just for her. She knows he actually believes in her, and she feels like she has to live up to Lord Aizen's expectations, but the fear is still holding her back. She stands there shaking, telling herself she's scared and wondering if she's really just going to stand by and do absolutely nothing again. Suddenly, a loud noise catches her off guard, and she screams out for Lord Aizen as the golem towers over him. He's pinned to the ground by the massive rock monster, but Aizen isn't giving up. He yells out to Villain that she needs to move right now. He's got the monster right where he wants it, and Villain finally sees it. The thing has its back turned, giving them the perfect chance to end this, though she's still doubting herself. She starts to hesitate, but then she hears Aizen's voice in her head telling her it'll be fine and she's going to be okay because he looks at her with total confidence. He tells her he knows she can do it, and that's enough to finally give her the push she needs. She plants her foot and kicks off. Villain launches forward like a rocket, charging into the fight. Villain puts everything she's got into her swing, flying through the air with her weapon raised high. She's finally committed to the fight, and the impact is massive, sending a shockwave of dust and debris across the whole room. She lets out a huge battle cry as she drops down on the monster. While the golem's eye glows, it knows she's coming for it, but she doesn't back down. The narrator mentions that courage is what makes the difference, and you can see it in her eyes as she pushes past her fear to scream one last time, putting every bit of her strength into the tip of her blade. The sword hits home, piercing straight through the golem's thick stone armor. Turns out a step forward really can break through anything. The blade shatters the core hidden deep inside the rock, and just like that, the monster's defense is completely gone. The massive stone body starts to fall apart, cracking and crumbling under the force of her attack as the whole thing just explodes. Dust and rocks fly everywhere, and Aizen gets caught in the blast, struggling to stay on his feet. Aizen starts coughing through the smoke, sounding totally panicked as he yells out for Villain to see if she's even okay after a hit like that. The dust starts to clear out from the explosion and someone tells them to wait. Virine comes charging in, screaming Aizen's name and asking why he'd do something so reckless. While Aizen tries to apologize and tells her she should be proud since she proved how strong she is, but she isn't having it, yelling back that the situation is definitely not fine. She demands that he starts taking better care of himself, and all he can do is sweat and agree. She leans into him, whispering about how she's just glad he's okay. Aizen gives her a soft smile and tells her she really did save him back there, and he explains that she acted on her own today, showing him that she's finally able to change. He puts a hand on her head, telling her she's not a coward anymore. Virine thanks him as they stand there together. Aizen just says her name as things finally quiet down. Villain tries to hold it back. A small gasp escapes as her eyes fill up and she just loses it, crying at the top of her lungs right there in the open. Aizen starts sweating and panicking. He quickly apologizes while she keeps wailing, making her yell out that it's not true. She cries about how she's never been treated so kindly before. She struggles to get the words out between her sobs, just shaking and saying she'll do her absolute best from now on. She wants to stand proud in Aizen's guild. It's a big moment for her. She's finally reaching a point where she can believe in herself. Aizen stays by her side while she keeps crying and promising to give it her all. Meanwhile, it's clear that to get anyone else to see her worth, she had to see it in herself first. And looking back at how she used to be, it's obvious that Villain is finally actually changing. Villain finally feels like she's moving in the right direction. She's smiling through the tears as she realizes she's finally taken a step forward. But the moment is cut short when they run into Salvio. He's looking pretty rough and can barely choke out her name when he sees her with Eizen. Villain looks completely caught off guard. She's sweating and staring in shock as her old leader suddenly shows up out of nowhere. Eizen steps up and gets straight to the point. He looks right at the guy and asks what the hell happened to the rest of his party. Salvio is in bad shape. He's on his knees, covered in blood and bruises, looking like he just went through a meat grinder. He starts shaking and losing it, stammering about how everyone else got wiped out and he's the only one who made it out alive. Going back a few hours, things were already falling apart. Salvio was losing his temper and screaming at the top of his lungs because he was getting called out for using Villain as a human shield for traps. And now he's being told he'd better watch his own back. It's a cold warning. He's told that surviving is only going to happen if he's actually even capable of it, which leads to Salvio absolutely fuming. In his head, he can't believe anyone would have the nerve to make a fool out of him like this. In Salvio's memory, he was feeling pretty good about himself after replacing Virin with a high-stat scout, thinking the whole mission was basically going to be a walk in the park. Back in the dungeon, Salvio is barking orders at the new guy, demanding to know which way they should go next. The new scout takes a quick look around and confidently tells the group they should head down the left path. He points out some faint monster tracks on the ground, explaining that an active path like this usually doesn't have many traps. And since they're going left, he tells everyone to keep their heads up and stay right behind him. But Salvio barely starts to yell out a warning when someone's foot clicks right down on a hidden floor plate. Everything slows down for a second. Salvio is sweating bullets, looking like he knows exactly what's coming. Suddenly, an arrow whistles through the air and slams straight into Salvio's shoulder armor with enough force to knock the wind out of him, leaving him yelling in pain as the trap catches him completely off guard. The party members freak out and yell for the new scout to hurry up, get the arrow out, and stop their leader's bleeding. Salvio is losing it, clutching his shoulder and cursing the guy out for the mistake, but Salvio doesn't stop there. He screams at the scout, demanding to know why he lied about there being no traps on this side. The scout is sweating bullets and looks completely panicked, stammering that there's no way he could have been wrong about the path, though he quickly changes his tune and snaps back, saying danger is on every route and asking Salvio if the last scout didn't teach him that, leaving Salvio totally stunned. Looking at the scout, Salvio starts to realize that the girl he called dead last might have been the only thing keeping them safe, and it hits him that they all just thought she was playing pretend while she was actually doing all the heavy lifting. He remembers thinking it was fine to just replace people if they died to traps, but now that he's the one bleeding, it's not so funny anymore since he finally notices that they never actually hit a single trap when Villain was the one taking point. He really thought it was just that simple, and all he ever had to do was follow the person in front without a second thought, but everything is falling apart now. A pack of monsters jumps out of the dark, cornering the group. The scout loses it and yells that red kobolds are everywhere, and it turns out the smell of Salvio's blood is what brought them all in, so Salvio tries to take charge and screams for everyone to get into assault formation. But things are moving way too fast, and one of the girls in the back has no idea what he's talking about, asking what that formation even is just as a monster stands right over her. Everything turns into a mess of screams and blood as the kobolds start tearing into the group, leaving the female adventurer thinking about how this is the worst situation ever, and she can't believe she ended up in such a trash party, while everyone else starts screaming for help, begging their leader to save them as they get ripped apart in the dark. Salvio just stands there shaking and groaning in pain, completely unable to do a single thing to help his dying teammates. It finally starts to sink in that he messed up big time by kicking Villain out, and he wonders if banishing her was actually a huge mistake. Back where Eizen and Villain are standing, they just watch the chaos from a distance until Salvio spots them and starts desperately screaming for Villain to come back and save him. Salvio is totally losing his cool, sweating and yelling about how kicking Villain out was a huge mistake. He even promises to make her his second-in-command if she just comes back and Villain starts to say something. But he cuts her off to tell her that she probably doesn't even know how much power she actually has. And he goes on about how he'll make sure that power is used right, promising her all the money, fame, or whatever else she wants, but Villain just looks down at him, her face full of disappointment as she realizes he still doesn't get it, leaving Salvio standing there looking completely pathetic and shocked that his offer isn't working on her. Villain starts to call him leader out of habit, but catches herself and uses his name instead, telling Salvio she's not doing this for money or some reputation. And she points out that he's always been obsessed with just numbers and power levels, which leaves Salvio completely speechless. And she explains the big difference is how Lord Eizen actually treated her like a human being instead of a tool. Moving on, she mentions how Aizen actually took the time to listen to her and try to understand her. And with a look of total confidence, Villain tells him straight up that she's staying with Lord Aizen. Salvio just stands there looking completely broken and shocked. Covered in bruises and dirt after everything that went down, he's basically done for. And just then a guy in armor runs up asking if everyone's alright because he heard someone screaming. Aizen looks over and explains that the guy on the ground was getting attacked by monsters, so he asks the new group if they can take the injured man back to the surface. And the armored guy says it's no problem since they were heading back anyway, but the man definitely needs some quick medical attention, so their healer starts using her magic to patch him up right on the spot. Watching them work, Aizen can't help but think that while he feels a little bad for the guy, he kind of brought all this trouble on himself, and Villain tells him it's time to keep moving. So Aizen agrees, and they leave the group behind to start heading even deeper into the dark halls of the labyrinth, moving on until Villain stops and looks around. Noticing that even though it's quiet and there aren't any monsters in sight, something feels wrong. She explains that this spot looks like a main crossroads where a ton of monsters usually pass through, so they really shouldn't stick around. They step into a massive room where sunlight hits a giant tree. It's pretty peaceful for a dungeon. But then Aizen whispers a new plan to Villain, who says she'll give it a shot. Villain shuts her eyes and takes a slow, deep breath to focus on the power inside her, while Aizen stands back and watches her work. She's tapping into a hidden skill called Super Sixth Sense that acts like a special eye for spotting everything from monster spawns to hidden traps using just her gut. And the best part is it reacts to mechanical stuff too, not just living things. Aizen starts thinking that maybe they can use this intuition to track down rare items, so Villain starts moving through the tall grass to see what she can find. Aizen figures if this doesn't work, they'll just have to go back to searching for loot the old-fashioned way. Villain's intuition pays off immediately as she spots something shiny tucked away in the grass and calls out that she found it, reaching down to pick up a small, ornate pendant. She holds it out for Aizen to see, and he's genuinely stunned, saying how amazing it is that her sense actually worked. He admits he never expected her power to be this incredible, but Villain stays focused on the item's history. She explains that the quest came from an old adventurer who had to retire after a bad injury and losing his whole team in the maze. And even though he survived, he was desperate to get back the pendant he lost in the chaos. As they flip the pendant over, they find a heartfelt message engraved on the back. Villain reads it aloud, noting how the members of the Daedalus party were bound by an eternal bond, before she starts listing off the names of the fallen comrades carved into the metal. Jurlark, Aloyv, Aleklas, and Charoletta. She looks at the names with a soft smile, thinking about how this small piece of jewelry is the only proof left of the lives they lived and the adventures they shared together, which really hits home for Aizen. He's touched by the idea of people who truly care for their teammates from the bottom of their hearts, and he's glad there are still adventurers like that left in the world. So with a new sense of purpose, he looks over at Villain and tells her he's finally picked out a name for their own guild. Aizen clenches his fist while talking about building a place that takes in outcasts, a spot where everyone can finally reach their full potential. He officially names their new team the Outcast Guild, and he stands there with a confident smile, looking ready for anything. Villain watches him and realizes that while others might just call him a dreamer, she really wants to support his ideals. She gives him a huge, happy smile and promises that as the very first member of his guild, she is going to prove her worth and stay right by his side until the very end. Later on, the two of them clink their mugs together in a toast, with Aizen saying there's nothing better than an after-party once a crazy quest is finished. They sit in the Avalon dining area where Aizen winks, mentioning how Kagari and Harrier were caught off guard by the news, which gets a loud, confused squawk out of the little bird. Kagari stares at the pendant in total shock, unable to believe they actually found it. While Aizen just smiles and reminds her he told her they'd pull it off, Aizen casually mentions how he knew he could trust his old classmates, but Kagari snaps, yelling at him not to push his luck after making her worry so much. And when he tells her she's sweet for caring about him, Kagari's whole face turns bright red as she tries to process what he just said. She ends up punching him and telling him to go die in a hole, but Aizen just laughs, thinking about how lucky he is to have friends like her later. He pulls out the reward money and gets straight to the point, suggesting they give Villain 80% of the total cut. Villain completely loses it, waving her hands around and saying there's no way she can accept that much cash for one job. But Aizen starts breaking down the logic, reminding her about everything they did to clear the labyrinth and beat the monsters. He makes sure she knows that finding the pendant was her achievement too, and she deserves to be paid for it. Then he gets this intense, scary look and tells her if she refuses the money, he'll just bump her share up to 90% and force her to take it, leaving Villain totally confused and wondering what kind of weird threat he's even trying to make. Aizen tells Villian that even though she doesn't seem to care about money, her current attitude won't work, because every adventurer deserves to get paid based on what they actually do and the results they get. Villian looks down, her eyes hidden in the shadows as she simply says she understands. Then she asks if she's allowed to use her reward money however she wants, and when Aizen says yeah, she tells him to take the cash for his guild founding fund, which catches him totally off guard. Villian isn't backing down either, telling him if he tries to refuse, she'll just wire the whole thing to him anyway, and then she'll frame him as some creepy guild master who forces girls to give him all their money. Aizen starts panicking, realizing his reputation would be trashed and the whole town would look at him with disgust. All he can do is let out a nervous laugh while thinking about how much Villian has changed. Looking at her now, he realizes she's actually got a pretty smart side to her that's been there ever since. Virian's performance really took off and became something incredible once she finally started feeling confident in that hidden skill of hers, showing everyone what she can really do. Moving on, Aizen gets a few more special requests to handle, though Kagari looks totally fed up asking if he's really doing this again. Even the most annoying and difficult item hunts are a breeze for him, usually taking less than half a day to wrap up. And when it comes to taking down rank monsters, the way they handle things is just on another level. He's got this crazy precision, hitting every single weak point to finish off enemies in just one hit. He's so efficient at clearing these requests that he actually makes some S-rank adventurers look bad, which leaves Aizen standing there feeling a bit confused about the whole situation. Virian is all hyped up, asking Aizen if he saw her moves, while he just tells her good job and wonders if he's even needed, since to be totally honest, he felt like he was basically just dead weight during that whole labyrinth run. After everything they've been through, Aizen and the group finally managed to pull it off. They've saved up all the money they need for the guild's starting funds, which means they're officially heading to the headquarters in Biam to turn in their application for the Exile Guild. Virian is absolutely losing it with excitement, and they arrive at Biam, a huge city for adventurers. Inside the Alliance headquarters conference room, some high-ranking members are already gathered, with one of them noting it's been quite a while since they last met. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat smiles, telling the others she's actually happy to see both of them again. But Salvio isn't feeling the love at all, calling her a she-leopard and making it clear she's the last person he wanted to see today. A guy in sunglasses tells them both to shut up and cut the chatter since the representative is right there, and the man at the head of the table agrees, saying they're starting the semi-annual meeting to decide the future of the entire guild. He looks over the room with a serious face and tells everyone it's time to start the Council of Representatives, showing Jelark Farnese, the Grand Representative, ready to lead. This whole massive system is the Adventurers Guild Federation, the giant organization that keeps watch over every single adventurer and guild out there. To even get started as an adventurer, you've got to join a guild first, just like how Virian picked hers out from the bunch. Every one of those guilds has to be part of the Federation, creating a massive network that runs everything. And the people at the very top are the reps from the 3 biggest guilds, plus the Supreme Representative who's basically the boss of the whole operation, calling them the 4 Great Star Emperors. These guys have the final say on the future of every adventurer, making them the ultimate masters of all guild masters. Jelark gets things moving, telling the room there are 2 main things they need to talk about today. First up is the Aqua Hydra, which has moved into the cave labyrinth over in the town of Halarna. It's a huge problem because a monster that can wreck even S-rank parties just showed up in a total beginner-level dungeon. Things are looking bad since a bunch of C and D rank parties already got jumped and took some heavy hits, and one of the masters says they need to do something right now, but Valk just yells out that the whole situation is total garbage. He doesn't want to wait around and tells everyone they should just put out an emergency hit on the monster. Valk wants to offer a massive 1,000 gold coin reward and make it a free-for-all for whoever gets there first. But the guy sitting across from him, Rado, points out that a post like that will definitely get people moving fast. He just looks at Valk and warns him that he's just going to get people killed, since that Hydra is way too much for A ranks or even new S ranks. Rado Kagura, the master of the Avalon Guild, tries to talk some sense into the room while Valk just gives him a look and says things haven't changed. The world is still about the strong surviving and the weak getting left behind. Valk Leopold, the master of Hecatonchair, slams his hand down and yells that if people choose to fight and lose, that's their own problem. The other reps in the room start raising their hands, quickly agreeing that they should just let the adventurers take the risk. Melarth Alashika, the master of the Arianrod Guild, watches the meeting go down from under her huge hat. She's got this creepy smirk on her face, saying this whole mess is exactly what they need to spice things up. She goes on about how a party could really make a name for themselves if they pull this off, and she looks completely hooked on the idea. calling the potential chaos exciting and wonderful while licking her fingers. Moving on, one of the guys in the back speaks up and asks the boss what his final call is going to be, and Jellark doesn't hesitate, telling the room they're going to run with Volk's plan after all. He thinks using a disaster like this to wake up the guild system is actually a pretty smart move, but he's not just letting it be a free-for-all. He rejects the idea of unlimited signups and says every party needs a guild master's okay. Jellark asks if everyone is cool with that, and Volk just gives a sharp-toothed grin and says he's down with it. Then the boss brings up the next item on the list, the status scouters that everyone has been using lately. Jellark shifts the meeting toward a close-up of the status scouters, bringing up the whole banishment boom trend, and Volk immediately gets loud, shouting that getting rid of low-stat trash is actually a great thing for everyone. Jellark calls him out but admits that wanting stronger teammates isn't a crime on its own. He points out that people have always left groups to move up, usually because of bad vibes or short contracts, but this new wave of firing people just for their stats is a completely different animal. What started with just a few top-tier S-ranks has spread to everyone, and it's even starting to lead to real violence. The Alliance can't just sit back while the public's mood and general safety go down the drain. Rado jumps in, mentioning how all this constant joining and quitting is creating a massive headache for the people running the guild. Mellarth adds with a laugh that there's even a rumor going around parties that kick people out to find high-stat replacements are actually getting weaker. And Jellark wraps it up by saying that real growth and success aren't just about the numbers you see on a scouter. Jellark narrows his eyes and tells the group that people who only chase short-term profits are eventually going to end up ruined. He's making a point, but Volk immediately starts shouting for attention, asking if the old man is seriously trying to say that things like bonds and compassion are what they actually need. He stands up at the round table and shouts that he's really disappointed in the old man, adding that Jellark should just retire already and hand over full control of the guild to him. Volk slams his fist down and says that once he's in charge, they can finally purge all the weaklings. He looks completely unhinged as he yells about making the guild thrive more than it ever has before. Jellark just sits there through the whole outburst, keeping his cool while he stares Volk down. He tells the younger guy not to get cocky and finishes by calling him a little brat, making it clear who's still in charge here. Jellark lets out a heavy aura that makes the air vibrate. Volk grits his teeth and tries to stay standing while he starts laughing to himself. He tells Jellark he's actually surprised the old guy can still make a face that scary, and then he just turns around to bail. Mellarth watches him walk away and calls out his name, but Volk just snaps that the conversation is over. He tells them to go ahead and try to regulate the banishment boom however they want, because as far as he's concerned, he's done. He says he'll stay out of it and won't do anything unnecessary for now, and he leaves them with a parting shot, saying everything is fine as long as Jellark doesn't lose that fire he's still got. Mellarth just sighs as he leaves, thinking back on Jellark's comment about how kids these days can be a real handful, and then she turns to Jellark. She admits she's not a fan of the banishment trend either, mostly because it keeps all the interesting adventurers she likes from appearing. So Jellark looks at her and says since she's a veteran now, it'd be great if she actually stepped up and kept an eye on the youngsters for him. Mellarth starts heading out, but not before telling Jellark and Rado they owe her dinner. She gives a quick wave and tells them both goodbye, disappearing in a flash of light with that same playful look on her face. Once the room quietens down, Rado looks at the empty seats and says the Lion King and the Witch haven't changed one bit, so he turns to Jellark and tells him he pushes Volk's buttons way too much, asking what the plan is if a real fight breaks out. Jellark just starts cracking up, saying he'll just test the kid's skills himself if it comes to that, while Rado just sighs and tells him to give it a rest. Rado remembers something else and tells the old man he actually brought some good news along, reaching into his vest to pull out a small item he's been carrying around. Jellark takes one look at what Rado is holding and completely loses his cool, staring in total disbelief as he holds the old Daedalus pendant in his hand. He can't believe he's actually seeing this thing again. Rado watches him and asks if it's been over 40 years since he finally retired from the game. Rado takes a drag of his cigarette and tells Jellark that if the item was really that important, he could have easily put a search team together a long time ago. Jellark looks down at the pendant, explaining that since it was just a personal memory of his, he didn't want to go around abusing his authority. He admits he was honestly ready to just give up on the whole thing if no one ended up accepting the request this time around. He stares at the medal in his hand, thinking about how everyone in the Daedalus party is bound by an eternal bond. He starts reading the names Gerarch and Aloyvi out loud, then Aleklas and Charoletta, quietly welcoming his sworn allies back home while he sits there. After a second, he pulls himself together and asks Rado if it was actually a party from his guild that managed to find it. Rado explains that the guy who took the request is actually a schoolmate of his daughter's. and he's a pretty interesting kid who's currently working hard to start up his own guild. Jellerk gets a serious look in his eye and asks Rado what exactly the person's name is. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, Eizen is slumped over on a bench with his head in his hands, completely stressing out over what he's supposed to tell Villain. Eizen sits there with his head in his hands, unable to believe his application actually got rejected, but to see how things went so wrong, we have to look back at what happened 20 minutes ago. Inside the office, the professor dismisses him immediately, saying the whole idea is absurd and telling him to just go home. Eizen is desperate, asking why this is happening and if the process shouldn't be as simple as just turning in the paperwork. The professor looks him right in the eye and says that only works when the person in charge doesn't have personality issues. He continues by trashing Eizen's plan, saying there's no way a guild can survive these days if it's just a bunch of low-stat exiles. He makes it clear he has zero time to waste on some crazy guy trying to build a guild that's basically doomed to fail. So Eizen snaps back, arguing that his team is actually getting real results out in the field. He keeps pushing, practically begging the man to tell him if there's anything else he can possibly do. The professor sighs and looks at him, finally giving in and saying he might have one option if Eizen is really that insistent. The professor points to some files and says if Eizen can actually catch the Grand Theft Gang, that famous group of thieves everyone is looking for, then he'll finally give him a chance to speak. Eizen looks at the wanted poster and sees a total creep with a mask and his tongue hanging out. He can't even process the name of the gang he's supposed to find. He tries to ask more about these guys, but the professor has officially reached his limit. He's so annoyed that a vein is literally popping out on his forehead. The guy loses it and yells that he's calling security if Eizen says another word. So Eizen has to book it out of the office before things get even worse. Once he's finally out in the hallway, Eizen lets out a massive sigh, feeling the weight of the impossible task. He starts walking away, thinking about how Villain was so hyped for him. If he tells her about the rejection, he's worried she'll lose her cool and start a protest. He keeps overthinking it, picturing her getting into so much trouble that she ends up getting arrested, which is the last thing he wants to happen. Eizen is so stuck in his own head, wondering what to do that he doesn't even see where he's going, until he slams right into someone walking the other way. The impact is pretty hard, and Eizen ends up falling straight back onto the floor. The other person is also on the ground and starts apologizing right away, but Eizen is more worried and asks if they're doing okay after the crash. Eizen stays humble and says he's actually the one who should be apologizing, but the old man just reaches out a hand and asks if he can stand up. He takes the help and says thanks while the old guy just gives a friendly nod. It's just a random run-in with a total stranger. But meanwhile, back at the room, Villain is busy checking herself out in the window reflection to make sure she looks good before they head out. Back in the hall, Eizen keeps being polite and asks the guy if he's doing okay or if he got hurt when they crashed into each other. The old man looks him over and mentions that Eizen definitely doesn't seem like an adventurer, which catches Eizen off guard. The guy just laughs it off and explains that usually, adventurers aren't the type to say sorry after bumping into someone. Eizen just says he gets it, but secretly he's thinking this old man has to be a retired pro based on the way he carries himself. Even though he looks a bit thin, the guy clearly has a solid build and a smile that shows he's got some serious confidence. The old man then asks if Eizen is at the academy to try and turn in a guild application. Eizen rubs his head and admits that was the goal, but the receptionist basically called him a nutcase and told him to get lost. The old man stops in his tracks and mentions he actually had plans to start a guild specifically for people who got kicked out of their parties, but something about Eizen caught his attention. He gets a real serious look in his eyes and asks the guy what his name is. Eizen looks a little confused by the sudden intensity, but answers that his name is Eizen Tesler, making the old man realize that this is exactly the person he's been hearing about. Watching from the side, Salvio just smirks and thinks to himself that this whole meeting might actually be fate. Eizen just stands there trying to process things when the old man asks if the receptionist told him anything else before he left. Since Eizen's still quiet, the guy brings up the Thieves Guild and says if Eizen can catch grand theft, he'll actually sit down and listen. The old man just stares him down with a heavy look, waiting to see how he reacts. Eizen starts panicking a bit and can barely get a word out because the whole situation is moving way too fast. He finally admits he just got to this city called Biam and has absolutely no clue what any of this means. Eizen asks if the old man would mind filling him in on the details, and Jellerk agrees to explain, starting with a bandit gang called Grand Theft that's been the main talk of the town lately. He explains that they started out as just a bunch of washed-up adventurers who weren't much better than common thugs, but they really started climbing the ranks of the criminal underworld once a guy named Hugo became their new boss. They've been involved in everything from theft and smuggling to kidnapping and murder, though lately, Their biggest problem has been the rising number of high-profile abductions they've been pulling for ransom money. Eizen looks pretty concerned and asks why headquarters isn't doing anything to stop them, especially since having former adventurers out there committing crimes is going to seriously tank the guild's reputation. Jellark says they are trying to make a move, but the group is like mist and impossible to pin down. It's nothing like fighting monsters in a dungeon, making Eizen realize that just finding them is the hardest part. Jellark closes his eyes, looking pretty pained as he mentions that even a close friend of his ended up being one of their victims, explaining how they were cut up with swords and had almost all their money and valuables stolen right off them. He looks down at his hand, feeling his age as he wishes his body could still move the way it did back in his prime, and clenches his fist tight, saying that what these guys are doing is something he can never forgive. Eizen looks totally caught off guard by the intensity of the old man's story, and thinks to himself that if his own friends were treated that way, he wouldn't be able to let it slide either. He realizes that if they just let this gang keep running wild, the body count is only going to get higher. So, he looks at Jellark and says that since his guild application is probably going to be stuck anyway, he's going to take a crack at tracking down Grand Theft himself to show everyone what a supposedly useless guy can do. Eizen tells him they should at least be able to find some clues even if they can't get revenge, leaving the old man completely shocked by the offer. Eizen looks a bit unsure, mentioning that based on everything the receptionist told him, he really doesn't think anyone at the guild is going to take him seriously anyway. Jellark just gives a little laugh and tells him that there aren't any liars working at headquarters. So, if a person like that actually existed, the Grandmaster would probably be pretty pissed off about it. Eizen laughs it off, saying that if the big boss actually cared about him, he'd honestly feel pretty great. He knows that being the Grandmaster means being at the absolute top of every adventure guild in existence, making them a total legend that everyone admires, even if they're a complete mystery to the public. He figures there's no way a high-ranking person like that would ever get angry over a kid like him. Yet, he still catches himself wondering what it would be like to meet them just once before laughing it off. Eizen keeps wondering what kind of guy the Grandmaster really is, totally clueless about who he's talking to. Jellark starts fixing up his cloak and says he should probably get going soon, but before he leaves, he tells Eizen it was a real pleasure talking to him and that he's looking forward to seeing what happens with that Grand Zeft group. Eizen can't help but laugh a little, wondering why anyone would expect great things from an unregistered guild that only has 2 members. It's just him and Villain right now, running a tiny provisional team that hasn't even made a name for itself yet. Jellark isn't having it though, telling him that luck is definitely on his side and that he's totally going to succeed because his own intuition is telling him so, urging Eizen to treat the whole thing like a test and give it his absolute best. The old man gives a final look back with a little smirk, saying they'll be seeing each other again soon. As he walks off down the hallway, he calls back one last time, telling the young guild master he'll see him later. Eizen just stands there with a smile on his face, watching the old man disappear into the distance, while thinking about how cool it was for the guy to call him a guild master, deciding he was a pretty nice guy after all. Eizen watches the old man walk away, thinking about how that guy had such an insane aura and presence, and since he was wearing a headquarters uniform, he's definitely some kind of big shot. He starts to regret not thinking ahead, getting a bit worried that he might have accidentally said something rude, realizing he completely blew his only chance to even get the guy's name. He decides to just let it go for now, hoping they'll run into each other again, and moves to tell Villain the news when she suddenly shows up super hyped, thanking him for all the hard work he put into their guild application. Eizen looks away, feeling like it's going to be really awkward to bring this up, but he knows he has to tell her. Before he can get a word out, Villain spots a market nearby and drags him over, shouting for him to look as she points out all the bread and spices, completely overwhelmed by all the choices they have. He finally breaks the news, and it goes exactly as he thought. He has to spend the rest of the day calming her down and talking her out of going to protest. Villain yells for him to come on, while the two of them head out to the town of Biam to investigate and just get a change of pace, walking through the busy streets as they start their day in the city. Villain is already running ahead, pointing out every shop she sees and shouting about how she wants to check them all out. She keeps going, saying she's curious about the next place too, dragging Eizen along through the crowded market stalls. Eizen just watches her with a smile. He's glad she's having such a good time after everything they've been through lately. But then Villain suddenly stops and huffs, her face turning red as she looks away for a second before she calls him out, asking if he was just thinking about how childish she's being right now. Eizen starts to sweat, quickly telling her that isn't the case at all, but she can see right through him. She lets out a laugh and says she's just kidding, leaving Eizen looking completely caught off guard. She tells him that since it's him, he's probably stuck thinking about complicated stuff, like how much he wants her to enjoy the trip. Villain keeps teasing him, acting out his internal thoughts about how it's his duty as a leader to make her happy after everything she's been through, which leaves Eizen looking pretty embarrassed. She gets closer, blushing as she tells him she wants to see him smiling too, then starts to mumble about not being a kid anymore and wanting to be seen as a woman. She's completely red in the face as she whispers it, but Eizen didn't quite hear her and asks what she just said. She panics instantly, waving her hands around and yelling that she only meant she wants to be seen as a real member of the team, before telling him that he needs to make sure he's actually enjoying the trip himself. Eizen looks down, feeling a bit called out, and apologizes for making her worry about him when he was supposed to be the one looking out for her. He gives her a genuine smile and thanks her, mentioning how lucky he is to have such great comrades by his side. Villain tries to act like it's nothing, but she pouts as she repeats the word comrade to herself, thinking that the title is fine for now even if she wants something more. Eizen just stands there totally clueless. They keep walking until they stop at a shop window to check out some cool stuff on display, and Villain is back to her cheerful self, laughing and talking as they continue their walk through the city. The two of them stop to check out some high-end gear through a shop window, and the massive sword on display has them both looking pretty stunned by how cool it is. They grab some street food next, and Villain is all smiles as she shows off her fruit crepe, saying it looks colorful and delicious. Eizen is enjoying the food too, mentioning that the lamb wrap he picked up smells amazing. He looks over at her and asks if she wants to try a bite of his. The offer catches Villain completely off guard, and she just freezes up, her face turning bright red as she makes a weird noise. Eizen sees her reaction and quickly backs off, apologizing because he figures a girl her age wouldn't want to share food like that. He starts feeling bad about being so careless and figures she's just at a sensitive age where stuff like that is awkward, but Villain is just standing there shaking until she suddenly snaps. She shouts for him to let her have some, though she's so worked up that she can't even get the words out right and ends up biting her tongue in the middle of it. She slumps over in total embarrassment, looking like her brain just short-circuited while Eizen tries to calm her down. He tells her it's totally fine and she doesn't have to force herself to try it, but she cuts him off immediately and insists she doesn't mind sharing at all. She's practically begging at this point, yelling about how much she really wants to eat it, leaving Eizen wondering if she's actually serious. Villain stares at the wrap Eizen is holding out, her face getting a bit red as she nervous gulps while waiting to see what it actually tastes like. She leans in and takes a solid bite, closing her eyes as she starts chewing. Her face completely lights up and she says it's delicious, looking totally blown away by the flavor. Since she liked his so much, Eizen figures he should try a bit of her food too and says as much while reaching for her crepe. He takes a bite and realizes it's actually amazing, thinking about how perfect the juicy lamb and the crisp vegetables are together. The rich sauce really ties everything together for him, and he decides the whole thing is basically addictive. He's already planning on coming back to this town just for the food, while Villain stands there trying to find the words to say something. She suddenly gets super loud and holds her food out, telling him he needs to have another bite too. Eizen tries to tell her she doesn't need to force it, but she just gets more flustered, yelling about how it's not fair if she's the only one eating and practically forces him to agree. He says he'll take her up on it then, leaning in to take a bite of the fruit crepe she's holding out. Eizen keeps chewing on the snack, realizing that it's actually really sweet and delicious. It honestly feels more like a full dessert than a meal, and he decides it's pretty great in its own way. As they walk through the busy street, he tells Villain he's glad he got to compare the flavors, but she just blushes and tells him not to worry about it while she stands there clutching her food. Her heart is absolutely racing after sharing a bite with him. She decides to just focus on the food and takes a massive bite of the fruit and cream, and with a hand on her cheek and a huge smile, she muffledly talks about how good it is. Eizen starts laughing and tells her she really eats with a lot of energy, which makes her jump in surprise. She's so embarrassed that she just looks down while steam practically starts coming off her head, so Eizen goes back to his own food and starts thinking about the mission. He knows they need to find info on the Grand Theft group soon. Once they get through the market, he figures the best plan is to head over to the main street where all the adventurer guilds are. Eizen finishes his snack and asks Villain if she wants to head over to the Adventurers Guild once she's done. She immediately agrees, sounding a little jumpy as she follows his lead. As they walk toward the massive building, Eizen thinks it's a good idea to see what a big city guild looks like for future reference, but the moment he steps through the doors, he sees something that stops him dead in his tracks. The lobby is a total mess, with someone shouting that they won't allow whatever is happening to go down, and Eizen is surprised to see a demi-human girl standing right in the middle of the chaos. He knows they're common in other parts of the world, but seeing one here as an adventurer is pretty rare. The girl is standing her ground, telling some guys that the guild would never allow this kind of bullying, yet the guy in armor just smirks and tells her they have direct orders from Lord Volk of the Hecatoncheir Guild. He claims their leader said the guild doesn't need anyone weak, a line that hits Eizen way too hard. The guy in armor looks down and tells the girl, make a triumph, that as of right now she is banished, leaving everyone wondering exactly what Eizen is going to do about the scene unfolding right in front of him. The armored leader makes it official by shouting that she's kicked out of Aegis, their S-rank party, while Eizen and Villain watch from the side, completely caught off guard by the harsh announcement. The leader, Clay, gets a smug look on his face as he repeats that Meika is officially cut from the team, and Meika completely loses it. She yells back at him to stop messing around. She demands to know when she was ever a burden to the group. But as she screams, Eizen and Villain just stand there as the rest of the guild starts whispering about how even a top-tier group like Aegis is finally exiling members. People in the crowd realize they're looking at the lead party of the Hecatoncheir Guild, the same ones who just took down a dragon, and everyone knows their leader, Dragon Slayer Clay, is one of the favorites of the powerful Volk Leopold. Clay keeps the pressure on, telling Meika that because Volk signed off on her exile, no other party will ever touch her, and he even warns her that fighting back might get her blacklisted from the guild entirely. But Meika just yells at the crowd to shut up because she doesn't care about any exile. Someone tells the little fox girl to just give it up already, right before the big reveal that Aegis already has a replacement mage lined up, a woman named Hilda the Necromancer. Clay looks pretty satisfied with himself, praising Hilda for being beautiful and having some seriously scary magic skills while the rest of the group stands by him. Meika turns to another teammate named Cyrus, hoping that he at least will listen to reason. But Cyrus just raises his massive shield and says that while protecting the party from magic is usually a mage's responsibility, Meika should know better than anyone how many times he's had to step in and neutralize enemy spells himself. Meika stands there completely stunned. She can't even find the words to defend herself after that. Villain is shaking and clutching her chest. She calls out to Master Eizen while gripping her uniform so tight her knuckles turn white, and Eizen just looks at her, seeing how much she's hurting right now. She agrees with him. Her eyes are full of tears as she says this is exactly what happened when she got kicked out of her own party. And the truth is this kind of thing is happening in guilds everywhere lately, leaving people totally broken just like she was. Eizen puts a hand on his chest and tells her he actually made up his mind back when he first saved her. He's decided he's going to put a complete stop to this whole exile boom trend once and for all. Villain looks at him in total awe as he explains his plan to build a place where people's unique skills can actually shine, regardless of what their stats say. Eizen tries to step in and talk to Meika, but she just snaps at him to shut up and save it for later since she's in the middle of a fight, which completely drains the guy's confidence. He stands there looking totally defeated. He has to pull himself together, telling himself it would be pathetic to quit now. He takes a breath and reminds himself that he's Eizen Tesler, the master of the Exiles Guild. Eizen stands tall and drops a bombshell, telling everyone he wants Meika to join his group, the Exiles Guild. He looks her right in the eyes and says he's here to scout her, while Meika just stands there with her mouth hanging open, barely able to make a sound because she's so caught off guard. Clay looks over with a smug face and admits he's never even heard of a place called the Exiles Guild, so Eizen just laughs it off with a bit of a nervous sweat, telling him it's fine since it's a brand new organization. In reality, the guild hasn't even been officially founded because the application got rejected, but Eizen figures he'll just keep bluffing and play it off for now. He shifts the mood and tells Clay he's got one thing he needs to ask him. Then he asks for the specific timing of when Meika and Silas first joined up with the party. Clay looks back at his teammates and explains Silas was there from the start, while Meika joined 2 years ago when they were still just B rank. Eizen doesn't miss a beat and asks if Clay seriously thinks she didn't do anything to help them reach S rank during all that time, which makes Clay lose his cool. He starts yelling about the real reason they rose to the top and got recognized by Lord Volk. Clay yells at the top of his lungs that the only reason they made it to the top is because they have actual talent. He looks down at his scouter and says Meika should already know her own stats, and that she's just going to hold the group back from here on out. He tells her that for an S-rank adventurer, her mana pool is way too small, which makes Meika grit her teeth in frustration. Clay puts on a smug smile and says that throwing her out now is actually doing her a favor before things get ugly. He starts bragging about the team, saying the bare minimum requirement to be a member of Aegis is having someone like him, the Dragon Slayer, as the leader. But he doesn't stop there. Cyrus jumps in to brag about himself too, saying he's the only one capable of neutralizing any attack that comes their way. While Clay moves on to the next member of his high-end mighty squad, joking that they need Hilda because she's a good woman, which she just laughs off with a wink and a thank you. The claim about Cyrus being able to nullify every single attack definitely catches some people off guard. Looking at the group, Aizen wonders if it's actually possible for any heavy warrior to have enough defense to pull off a crazy stunt like nullifying every single hit. Aizen closes his eyes for a second, thinking about how it's been a long time since the last time he had to use his special power, but he decides it's time to see what's really going on. He activates his appraisal eye, and his vision starts to change as a glowing mark appears over his pupil, giving him a clear look at the members of Aegis standing right there in the middle of the hall. He focuses in on Cyrus to find the real truth behind their claim of being able to block everything, scanning through the guy's stats and gear until the details finally start to click, and Aizen finally sees it, admitting that for a heavy knight, this guy has a seriously powerful hidden skill. The skill shows up as Ironclad Shield, a passive ability that automatically cuts all physical damage by 50%. Cyrus stands there looking pretty full of himself while Aizen tries to process the data, realizing that God's Shield is a perfect name for a skill that turns almost any hit into just 1 point of damage, making him the ultimate distraction. Aizen knows a heavy knight's only real goal is to soak up every single attack to keep the rest of the team from getting touched, and having a trait that naturally cuts all incoming physical damage by half is basically the dream setup for a tank. Aizen keeps digging into the stats, thinking about how an S-rank warrior would already have massive defense to begin with, which means standard enemies wouldn't even be able to leave a scratch. It's total overkill for regular fights, but the math really adds up when you combine that 50% reduction with a defense stat high enough to ignore weak hits. It's obvious that the God's Shield name isn't just for show. This guy is the actual wall that the entire party is built around. But something starts feeling a bit off to Aizen. He knows that most monster attacks are split into 3 main types: physical hits, magic spells, and status ailments. And usually a big guy in heavy armor is a sitting duck for magic or poison, leaving the mages to handle those specific threats while monsters out in the wild are constantly throwing out a massive variety of dangerous elemental attacks. Aizen thinks about how a party usually needs perfect teamwork between heavy knights, knowing it's vital to have knights for physical hits and mages to stop magic and poisons. He remembers Cyrus claiming his shield blocked magic earlier, but the stats show he never had that power. It hits him that nullifying every single attack isn't actually Cyrus's own ability, so he looks at Mecha and notices a strange magical energy surrounding them during the heat of the moment. A skill called Shrine Maiden's Blessing pops up, which can stop 3 physical hits per battle. The cost for it is a huge temporary drop in the user's max mana while they're fighting, but it also stops magic and status effects on a target as many times as they want. Aizen just stands there with his mind completely blown by what he's seeing. He can't help but think that this skill is way too powerful for anyone to just ignore. Aizen finally figures it out. Meika's hidden skill was actually covering for Silas's weak points the whole time, and even if it meant she had less mana to work with, it made the front line way more stable for the team. He thinks back to when she mentioned her low mana pool, which makes perfect sense now, and he's 100% sure that her hidden skill has been active this entire time. It's clear Silas was totally wrong about his own strength, so Meika yells for him to listen, but she can barely get the words out to explain that his power wouldn't even exist without her. Silas just tells her she looks pathetic. While Aizen starts to realize something might be off, he looks at her and asks if she's even aware of what her own special ability actually is. Meika is just confused and stammers, asking him what he's talking about, so Aizen asks why she didn't report the skill, since proving it's useful would make the party need her back. Hilda speaks up, saying Clay's name to get his attention since she reminds him they still have stuff to do and should probably get going, which Clay just goes along with, and as they start walking away, she asks him if he really called that place the Exiles Guild, so Clay just keeps being a jerk, saying a weakling like her might actually be useful for some bottom-tier guild, and he yells out that they can just take her if they want her, leaving Meika standing there looking totally crushed, just whispering his name to herself while Aizen watches the whole thing and says he's sure she will be happy now, because at least this way she's finally away from a trash party leader and a guild master like that. But Clay stops in his tracks and asks what he just said, giving him a look until Aizen snaps and yells at him for being willing to just dump a comrade who helped them get all the way to S-rank. Aizen doesn't hold back at all, yelling right in Clay's face that he and Valk are the biggest pieces of trash alive. Clay snaps instantly and lunges forward, drawing his sword in a blur to shut him up. The blade comes down hard, but it gets blocked right in front of Aizen. A huge shockwave goes off as everyone in the room just stands there frozen, completely shocked that an S-rank leader actually attacked. Villain is the one who jumped in to block the hit, screaming that she'll never let anyone hurt Aizen, and she's not going to stand by while people keep treating exiles like they're nothing, because she stares Clay down with total disgust, telling him straight up how much she hates him. Clay's face goes dark as he starts shaking with rage, calling them all bastards while the guild staff finally shouts for him to stop, reminding him that drawing a sword inside the building is totally against the rules. He tries to fight through them, yelling that he won't let the insult to his master go, but Hilda clings to him and puts on a fake act about being scared. Hilda puts on a nervous act and quickly apologizes to the guild staff for the mess, trying to play off the whole scene while they start walking away. Eizen watches them go, thinking Clay just let his temper take over, and he figures that since Hilda is a necromancer, her words have some kind of weird magical weight to them. Moving on, Eizen admits to himself that he originally thought she was just going to be a total party crasher, but it turns out she's actually way more level-headed and composed than Clay is, which makes him realize she's actually a pretty scary woman behind that fake smile she's wearing. He just stands there looking pretty worried about the whole situation as Clay yells back one last time, telling the group to never show their faces around him again. He even threatens them, saying he won't keep his sword in its sheath next time they cross paths. The guild hall buzzes with whispers while everyone stares at them. Eizen looks back at the mess and notes how bold it was to pull a sword inside the guild hall. He tells Meika to stop acting like she wasn't involved, though she's still shaken up and admits she thought they were done for. Villain joins in, agreeing that while Eizen looked pretty cool standing his ground, she really wishes he would have given her a heads up before things got that intense. Eizen gives Villain a sincere thanks for the help, admitting he just couldn't help himself from stepping in when he saw what was happening. Meika looks at him, still processing everything, and mentions she just felt way too sorry for Meika to let things stay the way they were. She gives him a little smile, telling Eizen that he's definitely a bit of an oddball, but she can tell he's actually a good guy. Eizen starts to say thanks, but Villain completely cuts him off, shouting that he's more than good, he's a wonderful person. She starts going off about their guild, explaining how the exiles are there to take in any adventurer who got kicked out of their party just for having low stats. Villain gets right in Meika's face, hugging her tight while explaining they're building a new home where people can finally show their true worth, and the pressure is so much that Meika can barely breathe. Villain is practically glowing as she suggests they both spend the rest of their lives supporting Lord Eizen together, which sounds a bit too heavy for Meika. The mood shifts when Eizen admits he actually just blurted the whole exiles idea out in the heat of the moment, leaving Villain shocked and Meika just standing there totally lost. Eizen rubs the back of his head looking pretty awkward as he admits the truth. The exiles aren't actually an official guild yet, and to make things even worse, he reveals that their application to become official just got rejected. So Meika starts to freak out, telling him to wait a second. She wants to know what's supposed to happen to her now since it sounds like he just scouted her for a guild that doesn't even exist. Eizen tries to explain himself, saying he didn't mean to trick her, but he has to admit that the way things stand, she's completely right. Meika's eyes go totally dizzy as she tries to process the mess she's in, barely able to even get a word out before she starts shaking Eizen like crazy, calling him a total fraud for taking advantage of her right when she was at her weakest. Eizen tells her to just calm down for a second, reminding her that he already said he'd take full responsibility for her at the guild. But Meika is already too far gone, crying that her life is over while Eizen and Villain both desperately try to get her to just listen, leaving everyone wondering if this is how a new teammate is actually supposed to join the crew. Meika looks out at the guild building and says she finally gets what's happening. She realizes the exiles got turned down, but there's still one way for them to make it, so she asks if he's serious about catching grand theft, that thief guild wrecking the city just to get their application approved. Eizen explains that's exactly why he's looking for a partner who actually knows their way around this place. He just gives her a friendly look, waiting to see if she'll take the bait. Meika lets out a long sigh and says fine. She admits she owes him for protecting her from Clay earlier, so she's down to help them out a little bit, making Villain and Eizen look pretty relieved, though Meika quickly adds that they shouldn't get ahead of themselves. She tells them she still needs to think about if she actually wants to be a permanent member or not. Eizen doesn't seem worried at all, telling Meika that he's happy to leave the final decision up to her. He jokes about them only being a small-time group anyway, but Meika just yells that he's totally missing the point. Eizen gets a serious look in his eye as he turns his attention toward Meika. He asks her straight up if her low stats were really the only reason she got kicked out of her old group, and Meika jumps a little at the question. She gets all flustered, but admits it's true her mana levels are pretty low for someone in an S-rank party. Eizen isn't dropping it though, mentioning that even Clay said something about it, so he asks her if there's actually a secret reason for her stats being that way. The second he starts talking about her unique Miko trait, Meika completely loses it and lets out a weird scream. She literally grabs him and covers his mouth, yelling at him to shut up before dragging him outside while Villain just watches them in total confusion. Once they're out on the balcony, Meika finally calms down and remembers him bringing up her power before, so she looks at him and asks how he could possibly know about her hidden ability, especially since she's never told anyone about it. Eizen just closes his eyes for a second, acting like it's no big deal as he starts to explain himself, telling her that he has a special skill called appraisal eye that lets him see the truth about people's stats. Eizen explains that his power lets him see everyone's unique traits and hidden skills, which leaves Meika standing there in total shock, barely able to process that her secret is out. He immediately bows his head to her, apologizing for looking at her private stats without asking, and mentions that since she kept it from her old S-rank party, she clearly has a huge reason for staying quiet. Villain steps in to calm things down, telling Meika it's alright and that Eizen is the perfect guy for keeping a secret like this. She starts to get a bit carried away, adding that every girl is allowed to have a secret or two, looking pretty flustered herself. While Villain starts squealing and hiding her face, Meika just stands there thinking the vibe of this group is a little weird, but she decides to trust him for now since he's too much of a softie to use her secret as leverage to make her join his guild. Eizen just smiles and promises he'd never do that, because his whole goal is to run a guild that actually does things the right way. Meika officially joins the group and tells everyone they need to move out immediately, leading Villain to ask where they're even going. Meika just winks and says they're heading to see an information broker. Dealing with brokers and guild receptionists is a huge part of being an adventurer, and having those connections is what usually makes a party famous. The bigger the guild, the more people they have talking in the shadows, so getting the right info before a big dungeon raid is basically a cheat code for winning at guild politics and dealing with people trying to pull power plays. In this world, knowing things is just as much of a weapon as a sword. Eizen realizes his only real link to that world is Kagari, who tells him he better be grateful for her help. The group finds their contact, dropping a few coins into his hand to get him talking about the Grand Theft Gang. The guy says he knows their real deal and exactly what kind of power their boss Hugo is hiding. The information broker starts breaking things down, telling the group the gang only has about a dozen members, which isn't much, especially since most of them are just washed-up adventurers. He says calling them professionals would be a stretch, so Meika points out that even if they are just amateurs, they've managed to build a pretty big reputation for themselves. The broker clarifies that the reputation is all thanks to Hugo. He's the one doing all the work while the rest just carry the bags. He starts explaining Hugo's secret, the real reason the gang is so successful. He tells them that according to the rumors, the guy can literally just vanish into thin air whenever he feels like it. It's weird because Hugo started out as a basic mountain bandit. Someone like that shouldn't be able to pull off high-level magic. Villain looks over at Eizen, who's already putting the pieces together, realizing it's not magic, but likely a hidden skill for invisibility. Everything starts to click for Eizen. He finally sees how the Grand Theft leader was able to run wild without getting caught. He knows that for anyone who doesn't understand how hidden skills work, a power like that would be completely impossible to explain. Meika points out that Hugo probably knows exactly how to use his power, just like the rest of them, meaning since he's using those skills for the wrong reasons, they're the only ones who can actually stop him. Villain agrees that the guy is dangerous, but she's not really sure where they're supposed to go from here, so Eizen decides it's time to split up. He plans on hitting up his own network of informants to see what they know. He tells the girls to head out and start asking around the town and the local adventurers guild while Meika gets fired up, saying they don't have a choice but to follow every single lead they can find. The sun starts to go down over the quiet town as they spend the rest of the day searching. Later on, Villain is looking pretty exhausted. She's bummed out because they didn't manage to find anything useful. She realizes her super sixth sense doesn't actually help when it comes to tracking people down, and Eizen can tell this whole situation is turning into a massive headache for the group. Villain is walking through the town when she hears a high-pitched cry coming from a nearby alleyway, and she finds a small puppy trapped in a heavy metal leg trap, whining in a lot of pain. Villain rushes over to help, telling the poor dog she's going to get those metal teeth off him right away. After a minute, she manages to get the trap off and bandages the little guy's leg up. Hoping that'll fix him, the puppy is so happy he jumps up and starts licking her face, catching her totally off guard. She starts laughing, telling him to stop because it tickles too much, while Eizen stands nearby and smiles, saying it's pretty clear the little guy is really grateful for the help. But Eizen's mood shifts as he looks at the trap, wondering why someone would put something that dangerous right here. Just as he's thinking about it, a group of tough guys shows up behind them and yells to get their attention. The group looks like trouble, and their leader tells Eizen they've heard all about them snooping around the Grand Theft Gang. The lead thug grins and tells the group they're an eyesore. He's got orders to kill everyone except for the Beastman kid, so they better prepare themselves for what's coming. Eizen looks the guy right in the eye and asks if the Beastman he's talking about is Meika, while Villain stands there holding the injured puppy close. The thug just laughs it off and tells Eizen there's absolutely no need for him to know anything about that. The whole group of thugs starts rushing in together, shouting that the two of them are going to die in this alleyway anyway. The leader gives off a creepy vibe, telling Villain they're going to take real good care of a little lady like her. But suddenly the guy's face completely changes. He lets out a confused yell as something moves way faster than he expected. Villain stands her ground without breaking a sweat, telling the thugs they can relax because she isn't even going to bother drawing her sword to handle them. She moves like a total blur, landing a heavy strike that sends the lead thug flying back before he can even finish his sentence. Her expression goes cold as she tells them that hurting a helpless puppy just to lure them out into a trap was a huge mistake. She looks him dead in the eye and says the punishment for pulling a blade on Lord Eizen is going to be excruciating, so they better get ready to feel it. The thugs start losing their minds, asking what the hell is wrong with this guy, while one of them yells for the group to stay calm and surround him. But it's too late as more of them get caught by surprise. They're letting out weird noises as heavy hits connect with their faces one by one, leaving Villain standing right in the middle of the mess, looking totally chill while she holds the puppy as the guys she just wrecked lay all over the ground. Eizen watches the whole thing and thinks about how Villain still has the skills of an A-rank adventurer. Some C or D-rank washouts were never going to be a match for her. And just as he's thinking that, another thug loses it and charges straight at Eizen, calling him a bastard while swinging a blade. The guy's eyes go wide when his attack misses completely. Eizen just leans back out of the way like it's nothing and steps into his own strike, landing a massive punch right on the guy's nose that stops him dead in his tracks. Eizen tells the dazed guy he's sorry, but back when he was a student, he used to get into plenty of scraps with people who tried to pick on him. He explains that even though he isn't exactly at the level where he can go around fighting monsters, it doesn't mean he's a pushover that anyone can mess with. He stands there looking at his bruised hand, admitting that his knuckles actually hurt pretty bad, and this definitely isn't something he enjoys doing. Eizen stares down at his bruised, shaking fist. He thinks to himself that it's not like he's actually strong or anything, but Villain comes running over to check on him, asking if he's hurt, and he just tells her she did a good job before leaning over one of the guys on the ground. He says they're going to talk now, which has the thug totally freaked out. The guy throws his hands up and starts begging for his life, promising to tell them everything as long as they don't hurt him. Eizen asks where the Grand Theft hideout is and where they can find Hugo, but the guy just stammers that he doesn't know. Villain isn't buying it. She looks at him with this annoyed face, holding the dog while telling him he better start talking or else. And before the guy can even react, she lets out a shout and strikes him right in the face with a precise hit. The impact is brutal. A loud crack rings out as the guy gets absolutely rocked by the pressure of her strike, and Eizen can only watch in total shock, wondering if she just hit some secret vital point that only she can see while the thug screams that he's telling the truth. The guy starts sobbing, explaining that Hugo only lets his inner circle into the actual hideout. Turns out grunts like them never get told anything important. Eizen thinks to himself that Hugo is even more careful than he thought, which makes things complicated since he needs real answers. So he looks the guy in the eye and asks what he actually knows about Meika. The thug starts shaking, stammering that he's from the Far East too, so he knows exactly who she is. He explains that Meika is part of the Shuriken clan, which is a huge deal back where he's from, meaning the truth is even crazier than they expected. She's actually a member of the royal family, leaving Eizen and Villain totally speechless. The guy keeps rambling, saying she was one of the missing priestesses, and he can't believe she was working as a regular adventurer in a dump like this. Turns out they couldn't touch her while she was with the Aegis party, but Hugo figured since she got kicked out, they could finally kidnap her for a massive ransom. It hits Eizen that these creeps have been hunting Meika for a long time now, and the realization makes him see red, especially when the thug has the nerve to suggest they join in to make a fortune together. Eizen's expression goes completely dark as he looks at the guy with pure disgust and tells him to just die. Eizen looks down with a terrifyingly dark glare, telling the guy to shut his mouth before he says another word. The pressure is so heavy that the thug looks like he's literally losing his soul, just completely out of it. Eizen snaps out of it, realizing Meika is out there all alone and he has to get to her as fast as he can. Meanwhile, Meika is struggling to breathe as someone grabs her, mocking her for being a kid out in a dangerous spot. The creep tells her she's basically walking money as her staff hits the pavement with a loud clatter, leaving the shadow of a gross bandit looming over her, laughing about how she was bound to get jumped by someone like him. Back on the street, Eizen and Villain are sprinting through the city when Villain suddenly points out something on the ground. Eizen stops to pick it up and realizes immediately that there's no mistake. It's definitely Meika's staff. He starts sweating as the pieces click together. The thugs they just fought were just a distraction while the main group actually went after her, meaning Hugo and his crew have already kidnapped Meika, and things just got a lot worse. Aizen thinks about how Hugo has a stealth skill that lets him vanish into thin air, making him impossible to track, meaning they can't even chase after Micah now that she's been kidnapped. Villain stands there holding a tiny puppy that starts whimpering. While she desperately calls out for Micah, Aizen looks at the dog and realizes the timing couldn't be worse for them to find a stray. He wishes he had some kind of help, just as someone nearby spots him and Villain from across the street. It turns out to be Kagari with her bird Naharia, and she's totally surprised by the huge coincidence of running into them while she was just heading to the Federation to turn in some paperwork. Aizen doesn't waste a second. He rushes over and grabs her by the shoulders, shouting her name. He looks her right in the eyes and tells her he needs her to lend him her strength immediately, causing Kagari to just freeze up, completely caught off guard by how intense he's being. Kagari's face goes totally red and she lets out a loud shout, completely losing it because somewhere else, Meika is finally starting to wake up, looking pretty rough after being taken. She slowly opens her eyes, making a groggy sound while trying to figure out where she is. Suddenly she hears the sound of metal clinking and realizes she's chained to the floor by her hands and feet. She yells out, asking what the hell is going on as a guy stands over her. He laughs, asking if the little lady is finally awake before welcoming her to the Grand Theft hideout. Meika looks around the room and sees the rest of the gang just chilling on wooden crates, making it clear she's in deep trouble. The guy in front of her sticks his tongue out and brags about being the most wanted man in the city, calling himself Hugo the Invisible. She recognizes who he is immediately, but her heart sinks when she counts 4 different guys she'd have to fight off. She starts thinking about using her magic, even though her power drops a ton without her staff. Hugo just gives her a creepy smile and tells her to hold on. This isn't their first time kidnapping a mage, and they know exactly what she's planning. Hugo points out the shackles on Meika's wrists, explaining they have a seal that shuts down magic. Meika grits her teeth and makes a pained sound. Feeling the weight of her situation, she glares at him, but Hugo just scoffs. She demands to know what he actually plans on doing with her. Trying to play her best card, Meika tells them she's an S-rank adventurer from the Aegis party. She warns them that Clay the Dragon Slayer won't just sit back and let this happen, but the whole room just starts laughing. They tell her they already know everything about her life, and Hugo leans in with a nasty grin, telling her he knows exactly why she got kicked out of her old group. He starts making fun of her new crew, calling Aizen a pretty boy and Villain a little brat. Then he drops the bomb that those two are probably already finished. Meika can't believe what she's hearing. She starts thrashing against her chains and screams, asking what the hell they did to her friends. Meika keeps thrashing against her chains, while Hugo just stands there letting out a weird, creepy laugh. Night has already fallen outside the hideout window, as Hugo explains that they've actually been tracking her for a long time. He gets right to the point and asks if she's really a member of the Shirikane clan, the royalty from the Far East. Meika looks totally horrified but tries to play it off, telling him his eyes must be rotting if he thinks a thief like her is royalty. Hugo doesn't buy the act at all and says that maybe threatening her clan will make her talk. But then he reaches down and pulls out a jagged, serrated dagger that glints in the dark. He looks at her and says she's being way too loud and energetic. And honestly, it's just getting annoying. Meika tries to stay tough and yells back that his threats won't work on her and he shouldn't underestimate her. Even though she's talking big, her hands are shaking like crazy against the metal shackles as Hugo tells her not to be so scared. He puts the blade right up to her face and tells her not to bother screaming because he isn't planning on stopping. Meika freezes up as a sudden loud noise cuts through the room. She looks over just in time to see something fast and bright flashing past her. Suddenly, the entrance to the hideout gets completely smashed open with a deafening crash. A massive pack of angry dogs and wolves comes charging down the hallway right at the gang. The thugs are caught totally off guard, and one of them can't even believe it's just a dog. The lead animals leap into the air, fangs out, as they lunge straight for the men guarding the room. Everything turns into total chaos. One guy yells out in confusion while another starts screaming as the dogs sink their teeth in. Hugo loses his cool completely and starts begging the animals to stop biting him while he tries to figure out what's going on. He struggles against the pack and screams at Meika, asking if she's the one controlling these things. Meika just looks back at him and yells that it's impossible since controlling dogs is way out of her league. Villain steps forward and confirms that everything is going according to plan. She explains to the group that the animals aren't being controlled by force at all, and they're actually just helping out because they want to. Meika looks on with tears in her eyes, seeing that everyone is finally safe from the chaos. Villain holds up a tiny puppy and tells them that Kagarina used her animal communication skill to ask the little guy for a favor, and the pup even went out and gathered a whole pack of his friends to join the fight. The little dog howls like he's proud of himself. A woman nearby lets them know that Kagarina is already on her way with more reinforcements from the Federation. Meanwhile, The dogs have already swarmed the area and secured the back exit of the inspection site so nobody can escape. Eizen turns his attention to the main target, calling out Hugo as the leader of the Grand Theft Bandits. With a sharp glow in his eye, Eizen tells him straight up that his crimes are officially over. Hugo just stands there breaking into a cold sweat, unable to do anything but hiss in frustration. Hugo looks over and sees his guys are already finished. The dogs have completely swarmed the place, leaving every single one of them totally wrecked. He stands there like a dark shadow, watching his gang fall apart until he looks up with a creepy grin, asking if they actually thought they had him cornered. Meika starts to sweat as she realizes he's using some kind of invisibility ability. Hugo vanishes into thin air and mocks them, asking if it's terrifying to fight someone they can't even see. He yells out that he's going to kill them all and make his escape. Eizen just stands there holding the puppy and tells him it's unfortunate, because he's already figured out how that hidden skill works. He remains completely calm and says that Villain can handle this situation all by herself. So Hugo loses his cool and tells them to cut the crap as he leaps down from the rafters. He drops from above with his dagger drawn, claiming that no matter who the opponent is, the sky is always their blind spot. Hugo's voice drifts through the room, mocking Villain and saying no one can find him while he's invisible. He continues to yell, insisting there is absolutely no way she could have spotted his location. But Villain just stays focused and calls out his exact position. She lets out a massive swing, her sword cutting through the air with enough force to wreck the whole area, looking completely locked in. She follows through on the strike with everything she's got. The impact is huge, blowing apart the surroundings and kicking up a cloud of stone and dust. Her grip stays steady on the hilt as she makes direct contact with her target, and then Hugo finally shows up again, pinned down and coughing up blood while looking totally terrified. As he drops to the floor, Eizen and Meika stand back and watch Villain finish the job. She looks over at Hugo and tells him that with her super sixth sense, his weak points are easy to see even if he's invisible. Hugo's secret comes out, his spatial distortion skill just bends light to hide him, but it doesn't mask his scent or the noise he makes, and it definitely doesn't stop him from taking damage. Eizen finds the key to the shackles in the thief's pocket, thinking his own ability is pretty handy right now. Meika sits there in her chains, totally confused about why they're helping since she already said no to joining them. Eizen just shrugs it off, reminding her that she helped them track down the gang in the first place, and Villain adds that they can still be friends even if they aren't in the same party together. The words hit Meika hard. She looks like she's about to lose it, moved by how nice they're being. As they move to unlock her chains, she starts to ask about their guild, wondering deep down if this might actually be the place where she finally belongs. Later that night in the city, someone's voice carries through the air, screaming an apology to Eizen. Some guy starts praising them, saying their performance against the Grand Theft Gang was basically magnificent, and then he just faceplants on the floor, shouting that their application is accepted and the membership fee is totally waived while begging them to forgive how he acted before. Meika stands there totally confused, asking what just happened all of a sudden while the guy keeps losing it. He's shaking and sweating, begging for mercy because he's sure the representative has already vented enough of her anger, and he's terrified that anything more will lead to a demotion or a pay cut that he won't be able to recover from. The guy just bolts out of there, screaming for them to forgive him while Eizen tries to stop him, but it's too late. The whole group just stands there in total shock, staring at the spot where the guy was just kneeling a second ago. Villain breaks the silence by cheering, asking if this means their exile guild is actually an official thing now. Kagari smiles and tells Eizen he's finally made it to the starting line, so he tells her she better be ready to work her absolute hardest, as she mentions that they're even getting a certificate of appreciation along with the reward money, proving that doing the right thing really does pay off. Eizen looks pretty relieved, saying that they finally solved one mystery and then thanks the group for being such a huge help. Villain is just happy the whole ordeal is over, hugging a small animal while laughing about how she's just glad everyone is safe. But Kagari isn't letting Eizen off the hook that easy, reminding him not to forget his promise to buy her dinner since she helped out. She gives him a wink and says she's gonna pick the most expensive meal on the menu, making Eizen think to himself that he can probably handle her, until she starts completely losing it, blushing and sweating while asking if this counts as a date or if it's just going to be the two of them. Once things calm down, Eizen turns to Meika and tells her he's really sorry for dragging her into such a dangerous mess, but she immediately shuts that down, telling him that she was the one who chose to help and he shouldn't go feeling responsible for any of it. She looks away for a second, starting to say something else while looking a little bit unsure of herself, and then she admits that she's actually the one who dragged the rest of them into her own problem. Meika clenches her fist and looks at the ground, feeling totally guilty. Eizen looks over at Meika, trying to get her attention while things are still a bit tense. She looks him right in the eye and tells him that she wants the three of them to go somewhere to talk alone. She clutches at her clothes, sounding pretty desperate as she asks if they'll actually listen to what she has to say. Aizen just stares at her, totally caught off guard by how serious she's being while she prepares to reveal her secret, but Meika is stuck thinking back to her past, remembering people whispering about why she's so different from her sister. She can still hear them saying that the Shirikane clan really only needs the younger sister to be the priestess. It's the kind of mean gossip from the servants that she never wanted to hear, but it stayed with her anyway. Every time she had to stand out in public with her family, she could just feel the judgment from the crowd. All she ever saw whenever she looked out at them were faces full of letdown and total disappointment. She remembers being called the elder sister, and then being asked if she was just completely useless. Meika looks completely drained, her eyes wide as the weight of her past starts catching up to her. She remembers the night she finally snapped, running through the dark woods just to get away from the Shirikane name. Even though she managed to escape that mansion and find some freedom, the move didn't fix everything because she's still living in the shadow of her clan, constantly haunted by all those old memories she tried to leave behind. Sitting in the guild courtyard, she finally admits she's been keeping a massive secret that's the real reason she got kidnapped. She hangs her head and says she's the one who should be apologizing for dragging him into such a mess. Aizen looks at her calmly and asks if this secret is about the family she was born into, leading Meika to freeze up in shock until he mentions that the Grand Theft bandits were already talking about it. He puts the pieces together and realizes they targeted her because they knew she was actually part of the royal family. He asks if that's why she hid her skills before, and if she's still unsure about joining his party now that they know the truth. Aizen looks at her and asks if that's really the only reason she's been holding back. Meika just sits there in silence, looking completely stressed out while he waits for her to say something. He doesn't drop it though, and asks why she's trying so hard to hide where she actually came from. Aizen points out that if people knew she was the princess from the Far East, the guild union would definitely give her protection plus. With a title like that, finding a top-tier party to join wouldn't be a problem for her at all. Meika looks down and says she can't talk about it anymore because she's afraid of causing him trouble or putting his life in danger. Aizen just shrugs it off and tells her it's fine because they're friends, which totally catches her by surprise. He reminds her that Villain said the same thing before, so it's not just him who feels that way. She looks up at him while he explains that he wants to help carry whatever burdens she's dealing with, and Meika finally breaks into a warm smile, calling him a total oddball and a softie for being so nice. Aizen looks at her and asks what kind of guild master he'd even be if he couldn't handle keeping a secret or two, and then he adds that he's already prepared himself for whatever trouble might come from knowing the truth. Meika stays quiet for a second, her eyes showing that she's finally ready to trust him. She takes a breath and reveals that her actual name is Meika Shirikane. She goes on to explain that she was born into a family of priestesses from the Shirikane clan, who are the royals of the Far East. For as long as anyone can remember, the priestesses in her family have given blessings to the warriors protecting their land. And it turns out this special power is exactly what people in these parts call the hidden skill, Priestess's Blessing. Aizen takes it all in and says it finally makes sense why she was already aware of her own hidden skill from the start. He watches her while thinking about how her family line is basically built around these unique powers, and realizes she probably grew up learning everything there is to know about them since she was a little kid. Aizen sits on the bench with her and asks if it's possible the clan just kept that ability a secret, and Meika confirms he's right, explaining that they did it to make sure the Shirikane clan had a total monopoly on that power. She describes how they kept the ability hidden from the rest of the world and basically kept the shrine maidens under house arrest. Meika looks down at the ground, looking pretty stressed as she says those days were nothing but pure hell. She grips her knees tight and brings up the fact that she actually has a younger sister. It turns out her sister could give out a much stronger version of the blessing, so everyone was always comparing the two of them. Meika explains that she was always made to feel small and felt like she didn't really have a place where she belonged. Everyone around her used to talk behind her back, even going as far as calling her a completely useless adventurer. She looks away and finally admits that all of that pressure is the real reason she ended up running away from home. She tells him she always just wanted to be a free adventurer who could live however she wanted, but then she starts to hesitate. Meika explains that she had way too much free time on her hands, so she spent it reading and learning enough magic to become an adventurer. Aizen points out that if people found out about her power, she'd be a target for thugs or get dragged back home, and she agrees, saying she thought her clan couldn't reach her here and figured that nobody would be crazy enough to mess with an S-rank party like Aegis anyway. She laughs it off a bit, saying it's pretty ironic that keeping her secret is exactly why she got kicked out of the party. She thanks Aizen for listening and says she felt like she had to tell him the truth since she got him mixed up in her mess. Suddenly she tells him to just give up on making her a teammate for the sake of his new guild, But Aizen just looks at her, saying her name while she starts to pull back into herself. She doesn't say a word, just staring down at the floor with a sad look on her face. Aizen tells her he appreciates her worrying about them, but that's actually the whole reason he's sticking to his guns. Aizen looks straight at her and says he wants Mecha Triumph to join his party as a member. She's completely stunned, looking at him with her mouth hanging open like she can't believe what she just heard. She starts to protest, but Aizen stops her by saying what she actually needs is a place where she can belong, explaining that it's not just about the secret skills she's hiding, it's about who she is and how she looks out for everyone and takes charge when it matters most. He stands his ground and tells her straight up that they really need her on the team. Aizen gives her a warm smile and holds out his hand, promising that his guild will be the one place she can always come home to. Mecha starts to tear up, whispering the words, a place to belong, back to herself like it's something she's wanted for a long time. Aizen realizes that even when she was trying to push him away out of fear, she wasn't actually rejecting him. It was just her way of being kind and worrying about what might happen to them. Mecha looks down, finally opening up about how she felt he was hiding his true feelings, but Aizen just smiles to himself, having already made up his mind that he's never going to stop reaching out to people who need help, just like he always has. He lets her know they're heading back to Daytona tonight, then starts walking, telling her she can find Kagari at the Avalon Guild if she changes her mind, since the guild can help set things up. He says his goodbyes and leaves her sitting there alone on the park bench, turning back one last time with a big smile to say they should meet again soon. Aizen disappears into the night, leaving Mecha by herself to process everything he just told her. He said all he needs to say, and from here on out, the ball is in her court to decide if she's actually ready to join them. The next day arrives at the Avalon Guildhall, and Aizen announces it's time to celebrate officially founding the Exiles Guild. Everyone raises their mugs, shouting cheers as the party kicks off. Kagari isn't exactly feeling the vibe though, asking why her dad is even there, and why he had to go and rent out the whole building. Rado just takes a drink, acting like she's crazy for asking. He says since they caught grand theft and got the guild started, they had to throw a massive party, especially for the debut of the classmate he claims Kagari is totally into. She gets all red and yells, demanding to know who said she was head over heels. She tells her dad to stop talking nonsense, but he just laughs it off. He turns to Aizen and tells him that way more people are on his side than he probably realizes. Aizen is a bit confused by that and asks if there's someone else besides the group at the table. And just then Villain pipes up, saying she also believes that when it comes to Lord Aizen. Villain listens as Rado tells her he really believes she's going to be the one to lead the way for all the other outcasts. And she gets all emotional, saying it sounds like a dream to have a place where people like them can finally show what they're actually worth. Kagari mentions how she used to be a total loner back in school, which makes Aizen wonder when he actually got so good at charming people. But he just plays it cool, asking Villain if she thinks he only scouted her because he saw some secret talent hiding inside her. Aizen throws his arms out and announces the whole night is on him, bragging about keeping his promise to get Kagari some top-tier food, though she just gives him a yeah, while he keeps going on about how this stuff is from that one place with the massive 2-hour wait. Everyone digs in and Rado admits the food is actually great, with Villain and the others agreeing it's the best they've had in a while. Even the little animal tagging along gets a bowl and starts eating. The night goes on under a clear moon as the party continues inside, and Kagari looks over at Aizen, telling him that even after all this time, he really hasn't changed a bit. Kagari gives him a look and says she can't believe he actually went and became a guild master, and then she just laughs, calling him a complete and total idiot for the way he does things. Aizen just takes a drink and laughs along, saying if he was so straightforward that he just charged ahead, he's going to take that as a compliment. But Kagari points out that his blunt attitude is exactly why the teachers and Professor Germain hated his guts, while Villain joins in, thinking back on how crazy those days were. As they keep hanging out, Kagari looks over at him and asks if he still remembers how things were back when they first met, which actually catches Aizen off guard for a second. She starts thinking back to school, remembering herself laughing with her friends on a bench back when she was convinced she couldn't actually hear what animals were saying. Everyone always told her there was no way she could understand them, so she just went along with it, sitting there alone and forcing herself to believe that what everyone said was the truth. Kagari remembers sitting on that bench with her friends, feeling like she had to hide who she was, until a young Aizen just walked up and asked why she was ignoring the birds when she could clearly understand them. She was completely shocked because even though she was sitting right next to a friend, they didn't notice a thing. Back in the present, she looks at him over her drink and says that looking back, he probably saved her too, which makes Aizen smile and tell her they're pretty much even at this point. He admits that back then, nobody would take his word for anything except for her. And that's why he's here now, telling her thanks and mentioning how glad he is to have such a great friend by his side. Kagarina just stares at him for a second, her face turning bright red from the sudden honesty, so she hides her blush and jokes that he better do a good job taking care of that precious friend then. Eizen shouts that he definitely gets it, while Meika looks on awkwardly and Villain keeps enjoying her drink. Villain looks a bit red in the face while she sips her drink, admitting that she was also able to change for the better because of everything Eizen did for her. She keeps going, telling Kagarina that Eizen is definitely an important guy who really understands her too, which makes Kagarina completely lose it. She starts blushing like crazy and stutters that it's not true at all, shouting that she doesn't feel that way about him even a little bit. Villain is just off in her own world with a huge smile, asking Kagarina if she gets how she feels, but Kagarina just looks at her, realizing something is way off. Kagarina finally notices the smell and asks if the drink is actually wine instead of juice, while Villain just giggles and says how good it tastes. Salvio starts cracking up and tells everyone to drink up since he's paying, but Meika gets pissed and asks if he's the one who gave her alcohol. Then she tries to get Villain to drink some water. Things settle down a bit as Salvio takes a swing from his mug and asks Eizen if he has any big plans coming up. He points out that now that they've officially raised the guild flag, they have to start building a real reputation for the Exiles Guild, so that new members will actually want to sign up on their own, and the others agree that's the way to go. Eizen just rubs his face and smiles, admitting that he knows there aren't any shortcuts to making this guild work out. Eizen explains that he plans to keep growing the guild by reaching out to more exiles. Meanwhile, Villain is totally red and chugging her drink while Meika watches her. Rado leans in with a serious look and asks Eizen if he wants the Exiles Guild to take on a hunt for an Aqua Hydra, which leaves Eizen, Meika, and Villain completely frozen in shock. Rado just starts laughing like it's a joke, but someone at the table tells him to knock it off. Meika can't help but sigh, wondering if her dad has had way too much to drink tonight. Villain starts panicking because that monster is something even veteran S-rankers can't handle. She's so overwhelmed she says she might actually pass out. Rado's face goes totally blank and serious as he stops laughing. Eizen just stares at him, unable to even process what he's hearing. Rado explains that this Aqua Hydra moved into a low-level dungeon and has been wrecking C and D rank parties. It's turned into a total mess. He tells them the Guild Federation has put out an emergency quest with 1,000 gold coins for whoever gets it first, and it's clearly a huge deal. Rado explains that this mission isn't just a random job, it's a direct order coming from the Grand Representative himself, meaning the guild is putting their faith in the same power that took down the Grand Theft Gang not too long ago. Meika's eyes go wide as she realizes the representative is the one behind this, finally connecting the dots about who her dad was hyping up earlier, making things even more intense since Volk is already getting his S-rank party ready to move out. Rado thinks that for Eizen, this is a massive, once-in-a-lifetime shot to put the Exiles Guild on the map for good. Kagarina isn't having it though. She yells at Rado, asking if he's actually trying to get Eizen and everyone else killed with a suicide mission. Villain is just standing there looking completely pale and spaced out. The whole situation is just too much for her to handle. She makes a faint, weird noise and starts to pass out, forcing Kagarina to catch her before she hits the floor. And as she lays there with her head in Kagarina's lap, she just mumbles that taking on a Hydra is still way beyond what they can do. Eizen looks pretty stressed out too, admitting that he wouldn't be much help in a real fight against something that big. Eizen is looking pretty stressed, sweating as he thinks about how Villain is the only member they have right now, yet they're supposed to go after a massive Aqua Hydra. It's a lot to take in when someone suddenly speaks up from the doorway, asking what would happen if there were two of them instead of just one. Eizen looks up fast, totally caught off guard by the voice, and he shouts Meika's name as she stands there with a huge grin on her face. She mentions the Hydra hunt again, saying that with the kind of skills she picked up back when she was in that S-rank dragon-slaying party, she's ready to show the world exactly what they can really do together. Eizen turns toward her, asking if she's finally made up her mind about joining the team for good. He gets a serious look in his eyes, saying he's decided to trust his own judgment and her potential, so from this moment on, he's putting the future of the party in her hands as well. Meika looks absolutely hyped, declaring that the Exiles Guild is officially on the move and joking about finally finding her own place, which Eizen just smiles, looking relieved to finally have some backup. Meika looks around the room, asking where that girl she saw earlier went, while Eizen just points down to the floor with a nervous smile. Turned out Villain is completely passed out on the ground, making weird groaning sounds. Meika leans over her, saying she was so brave yesterday but looks like a total mess now, trying to get her to wake up. Once she's finally up, Meika tells them she's hyped for the Hydra hunt and looks forward to working together, leaving Villain just sitting there in total silence. Meika leans in close and calls out to her cheerfully, Calling her senpai for the first time, Villain absolutely loses it, screaming senpai back in shock because she can't believe the girl she looks up to is right there. Meika seems pretty into the idea too, realizing she finally has a junior member to look after while Villain just sits there completely frozen. Meanwhile, deep inside the Helana Cavern Labyrinth, a dark and jagged cave system, Clay stands before his team, reminding everyone that Lord Valk personally trusted them with this specific mission. The fight with the Aqua Hydra is about to kick off, and Clay tells them all to make quick work of it using the power of their party. Cyrus and Hilda stand ready behind him, and with Clay leading the charge, the S-rank party moves in to start their hunt. The Hydra lurches forward with a massive roar, and Clay quickly warns Silas that the attack is coming. Cyrus steps up to the front, telling everyone to leave it to him because breath magic doesn't stand a chance against his shield. He looks pretty confident about it too, promising the rest of the party that he's just going to nullify the whole thing. The Hydra's mouth glows as it charges up a huge blast of energy. A massive beam of light slams right into the center of the shield. Cyrus looks completely stunned. The force behind the magic is way more than he expected, leaving him caught in the middle of a massive explosion that tears through the cavern and sends rocks flying everywhere. Clay watches as blood splatters across the floor. His frontline just got absolutely destroyed in a single hit. He starts to freak out, barely able to get any words out as he tries to process what just happened to his teammate. With the Hydra's heads looming over them in the dark, Clay screams out for Silas as the situation falls apart. 2 days pass by after the group's last encounter. The trail leads them deep into the woods to a hidden cave. This is the cave dungeon near the town of Horana, a dark place filled with sharp rocks that look like teeth. Inside, the silence is broken by the sound of a sword clashing hard against something solid, sparks flying everywhere. Villain watches the fight with her mouth wide open, completely shocked by what they've run into. She asks if that thing is really just a giant crab, while Eizen points out that the monster is absolutely massive. The crab swings a huge pincer through the air, and Villain screams as the heavy limb narrowly misses them. Villain shouts Meika's name in a panic, but Meika stays perfectly calm and focused on the enemy. Meika catches the next attack on her staff, creating a burst of light that leaves Eizen and Villain totally stunned. With the monster right in front of her, Meika starts her chant and softly says the word Suimu. She commands the beast to sleep, hitting the giant crab with a wave of magic to shut it down. The giant crab is completely out of it, letting out a tiny sound as the sleep spell takes full effect. Villain doesn't waste a second and tackles Meika in a huge hug, shouting about how amazing she is. She keeps going on about how seeing that magic in person was just incredible, while Meika starts laughing and tells her to stop because it tickles. Meika takes a second to explain that what they just saw was her hidden skill, something she calls Maiden's Blessing. She breaks down how it works, saying it can completely block physical hits during a fight, though it only works 3 times. But that's not even the best part. She also mentions it has a separate effect that's always active. It turns out she's basically untouchable when it comes to magic and status effects, since the skill cancels those out forever. There is a catch, though. She explains her mana takes a massive hit while the skill is up, so she can't throw out any big spells. She adds that the physical shield recharges pretty fast, usually after they take a quick breather once the fighting is over. Villain gives her a warm smile and thanks her for being open about her secret skill, glad they're all on the same page now. Meika gives a confident wink and a thumbs up, promising that they won't let a disaster like what happened with Aegis happen to them. It turns out there was more to the situation than just her getting kicked out or hiding her special blessing. It all goes back to some serious news that reached them just as they were getting ready to head out for the day. Rado Kagura breaks the news that the S-rank party Aegis actually failed to take down the Aqua Hydra, which catches Eizen completely off guard. He adds that the group took a massive hit when they lost their heavy warrior during the fight, making things look pretty grim. Meika looks visibly shaken hearing about her old party, especially since it sounds like her former teammate Cirrus was the one who went down. She starts to sweat, realizing that if a top-tier S-rank tank couldn't handle this monster, they're in for a serious challenge. Eizen clenches his fist tight, determined to step up and give this request everything he's got despite the risks. But Rado Kagura keeps it real, telling him he's prepared to call for an immediate retreat if he thinks the party is in over their heads. He gives a sharp, confident grin, reminding them that keeping everyone safe is exactly what his job as a guild master is all about. Eizen takes the job, saying he's cool with it even though the request came straight from the representative. Rado Kagura leans in and tells him that once they're out there, he's the one calling the shots on the ground. He puts a hand on Eizen's shoulder and reminds him to keep a level head and judge every situation calmly as they go. The energy picks up as they get a big send-off, with people cheering for the Exile Guild to go kill it. As they walk away, Villain looks around a little disappointed, noticing that Kagarina never showed up to say goodbye, but Aizen just smiles, saying he knows she's only staying away because she's so worried about them. He pulls the group together and says the most important thing is that the three of them all make it back in one piece. Meika gets a look of real determination on her face and promises she'll protect Villain no matter what happens, which makes Villain beam as she tells the younger girl she's putting all her trust in her support. Aizen starts prepping his gear and says he'll do whatever he can to help out too, grabbing some explosive flasks just in case. The group starts closing in on the spot, with a warning to keep their guard up because they're basically there. They step into a massive cave that feels way too quiet and creepy for comfort. Villain suddenly tenses up and yells that something is headed their way right now. The ground starts shaking like crazy and ripples across the water, making it clear something huge is coming. A massive shape explodes out of the depths, sending water flying everywhere as it reaches the surface. Aizen and Villain just stand there looking up, completely dwarfed by the monster that just showed up. Multiple scaly, dragon-like heads start rising into the air, looking incredibly mean and ready to strike. The creature keeps unfolding, showing off even more heads as it fills up the entire cave space. It's a total nightmare of a beast, dripping wet and towering over the small party. Aizen realizes they're looking at the seven-headed Hydra and can't believe how big the thing actually is. Meika checks in to see if Villain is ready for this, and Villain gives her the green light, charging straight at the massive beast while shouting that she's going in. Everything cuts back to a lesson where Aizen explains that while normal Hydras have 9 heads, this Aqua Hydra is a massive monster known for using those heads to pull off coordinated attacks. But the main thing they have to worry about is the creature's special water magic called Water Breath, which Aizen points out on the board. He warns the girls that the attack is incredibly sharp, meaning any weak defenses are basically useless. As Villain listens closely in the past, Aizen starts going over the exact plan to counter that kind of power, and right on cue in the present, one of the heads opens its mouth and starts swirling a huge vortex of water. Villain locks onto the threat, recognizing it immediately as the water breath attack Aizen described. The monster fires a high-pressure beam right at them, but Meika tells Villain to stay calm because she's on it. Meika focuses her power, telling Villain she's got a special blessing ready for her, an enchantment that's about to change the game. Villain stands her ground as the water beam hits her magic barrier and scatters. The monster head pulls back in surprise as its main attack does nothing, and Aizen sees the opening, shouting that the priestess's blessing completely shut down the water breath. He yells for Meika to cover him as he pushes forward. The group moves in fast while the water spray still hangs in the air. Meika lets out a shout as she spots another opening and starts prepping her own magic. She calls on the winds to gather around her, unleashing a storm blade attack that cuts through the air. Wind magic rips through the monsters' necks, keeping them pinned down. But just as they get the upper hand, Villain notices something is off and looks up. One of the heads dives right at Villain while she's stuck in a defensive stance. Villain braces for the impact as her physical void ability kicks in, just barely managing to hold on. Meika admits her low-level magic isn't going to be enough to finish this thing, so Villain shouts for Aizen to jump in and help. Aizen doesn't hesitate, he charges forward with everything he's got, ready to end this fight. He calls out to the ice and unleashes a massive frost nova, a giant swirl of freezing energy that slams directly into the monster's face, catching it completely off guard. The temperature drops so fast that even the nearby gear starts to freeze over, and the Hydra gets absolutely blasted by the icy explosion, throwing its heads back in pain. The magic connects with enough force to rattle the beast's entire body, but Meika warns them that even though they blocked the water breath, the fight is far from over. She explains that the Hydra still has one more power left, and that's when things are about to get real. The Hydra's severed neck starts bubbling and shooting out energy. The beast is already using its regeneration to bring its heads back, making it clear that just cutting them off isn't going to be enough. It turns out the monster is basically immortal unless they can land a perfect hit on its one true weak point. Villain realizes that finding that opening is all on her. She's the only one who can see it, so she plans to use Meika's blessing to dodge the chaos while using her own sixth sense to find the heart of the beast. This has to be a fast, one-shot kind of move, and their teamwork is the only thing that's going to make it happen. Even though this S-rank monster heals faster than anything they've ever seen, the ice and explosive combo is actually starting to do some real damage. Aizen thinks if he can just lock down one more head to give Villain the opening she needs, they might actually win this. He looks at the fight and realizes this is their big chance to show everyone the true power of a group of outcasts, proving once and for all that adventurers are worth way more than just the numbers on a scouter. Aizen thinks if they can just take down the Aqua Hydra here, then everything else. The monster lets loose a massive swirling water blast that rips through the air. Meika yells that it's useless because as long as Villain has the Shrine Maiden's blessing, magic won't even touch her. A bright flash of energy surges out as the two powers collide, but the force is too much, and the whole area starts getting absolutely wrecked. Eizen looks up and sees things are going south fast as he starts to realize what's happening. Rocks and debris begin raining down from above while Meika tries to shield herself. It hits him then. The entire ceiling of the cave is actually coming down on them. The roof gives way completely, sending massive boulders crashing toward where they're standing. Eizen dives and throws himself over Meika, barely shielding her as the ground explodes into rubble. Villain screams out for Eizen and Meika. She looks totally terrified as the chaos unfolds, and she curses under her breath, seeing how bad the situation is getting right in front of her. The rocks come crashing down and Villain has to shield herself as the impact hits, but she notices her physical defense just neutralized another hit. That's the second time it saved her. Eizen pulls himself out from under the rubble, desperately calling out Villain's name to make sure she's okay. He starts realizing they're in deep trouble because while their magic defense is fine, their physical nullification only has one more use left. After that, they're wide open. He thinks about trying to dodge all 7 heads to reach the weak point, but it's too risky, so he slams his fist into the ground and tells Meika and Villain they need to fall back immediately. He yells for them to move now. They have to use the dust cloud as cover to get away. The dust starts to settle, and the group realizes something terrible has happened, while Eizen grunts in frustration, seeing that the entire tunnel behind them is buried under massive rocks. Villain and Meika look completely terrified as Eizen yells that their retreat is totally cut off, leaving them in a hopeless spot with no way out. Meika grips her staff and tries to focus her energy even though she's shaking, because it turns out the Aqua Hydra's relentless attacks weren't just for show. The monster was actually aiming to bury them alive, and now it has successfully blocked off their only escape route. Eizen admits things are looking really bad right now, and Villain can't help but agree as they listen to Meika explain what it would take to get out. She says she can use a spell strong enough to blow the rocks away, but there's a massive catch. She'd have to stop using her priestess's blessing defense to pull it off. She's worried the Hydra is just waiting for that exact moment to drop its guard, so it can snipe them with a deadly blast of water breath. Thinking through the strategy, the group realizes trying to take down the Aqua Hydra is a nightmare, especially since there's only one physical attack nullification left, and getting close enough to actually do damage means slipping past all 7 of those heads, which just seems totally impossible right now. Eizen grits his teeth, looking completely crushed by the situation. He apologizes to the girls, telling them it's all his mistake for putting them both in this kind of danger. Villain just stares at him, her heart sinking as she hears him blame himself, but she suddenly snaps out of it. She shouts no, refusing to let him give up. She leans in and tells him there has to be another way out of this mess. Eizen looks at her, totally caught off guard by her energy as she reminds him that he was the one who figured out how to actually use her power in the first place. She's got this look of total belief in her eyes, saying she's absolutely sure he will find a way to save them. Eizen just says her name, clearly moved by how much she trusts him even when things are looking this bleak. Someone calls out to him, noting how the boy has the rare gift to see the hidden talent in people, something that usually takes years to find. Young Eizen looks up in total awe as he listens to his mentor explain how it usually takes people way too long to actually see the truth. The man sits with him on a rock, telling him to use those special eyes of his to become someone who leads others, and he tells the kid to never forget that. He gives Eizen a pat on the head, explaining that having raw talent isn't actually what matters most. What really counts is the heart and effort that supports it. In the present, Eizen stares ahead with a serious look, remembering that everything he's been doing was always for the sake of his comrades. He has this moment of clarity, realizing that things have been moving so fast lately that he almost lost sight of why. He started this straight up admitting to himself that he nearly forgot his original goal in all the chaos. It wasn't just about forcing the world to acknowledge the people who got kicked out of their parties. Looking at Villain and Meika, he thinks about everyone who got screwed over by a system that only cares about numbers. And he's determined to show them that every single person has their own way to shine, no matter what some scouter says, and seeing the girls standing there together, he realizes that's the one thing he's wanted to tell them from the very start. Eizen's eyes lock onto his goal, showing he's finally got his head back in the game and is ready to turn toward the girls. He calls out to Villain, who looks a bit taken aback by his sudden serious tone. She gives him a nervous look, just nodding and saying okay as she waits to see what he's up to. Eizen reaches out toward her without saying another word. Before she can even react, he pulls her into a sudden hug and tells her thank you for everything, but Villain completely loses it. Her face turns bright red and her head starts spinning from the shock of it all. Eizen just smiles, feeling genuinely happy about having such great friends, while Meika watches them from the side. He gets his game face back on and tells the girls they need to get behind the rocks so he can think. Looking out at the massive threat ahead, he knows they need a solid plan to stop the Aqua Hydra huddling behind a boulder. He asks Meika if her blessing works on objects too, and she says it does. Meika explains that even if the target changes, the count for nullifying physical attacks won't reset during the fight. She points out that while magic nullification is unlimited, they've only got one shot left for physical hits. Eizen asks if the physical classification covers the impact too, and Meika says it probably does. He says alright and turns his attention back to Villain and Meika, ready to start explaining exactly how they're going to survive this. He tells them they're moving out, but to make the plan work, he needs Villain to focus entirely on dodging and distracting the enemy. Meika freaks out and asks him to wait, worried about leaving Villain completely defenseless like that. Villain speaks up and tells Meika she'll be fine, especially if her only job is just to keep out of the way. She looks over at them with a determined smile, saying she really thinks she can do it. Seeing the opening, she realizes this is actually the best chance they're going to get. Villain is totally pumped and yells out that she feels like she can dodge anything thrown her way. Eizen watches her and thinks back to the day they met, realizing just how much she's grown since then. He looks at her and thinks about how dependable she's actually become, seeing a side of her he really trusts. Eizen catches himself and says they're good to go, finally focusing back on the battle ahead.